Hello and welcome to 6 Part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Fell in Love with Tatsumaki Part 5. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Everyone was watching, and some people were quite alarmed and worried about what they were seeing on their TVs, phones, tablets, and iPads. Tatsumaki, the well-known adolescent UA girl, was set to battle Psychos, the UA dropout and villain who was in charge of everything. The whole intensity of it was building even though they weren't present at the scene. They just saw Psychos use a finger snap to eliminate Garo, the hero hunter who has defeated innumerable heroes. The same Esper was now going to take on a half-her-age opponent. A worried woman asked, "Where are the heroes?" In a living room, another man said, surrounded by some friends. "I never thought UA would be invaded like this, and now one of their students is about to face someone that's strong." At a cafe, a Gyaru who was missing school with her friends said, "There's no way she can win." In his office, a salaryman remarked, "With the overwhelming number of monsters in the city, every hero seems so occupied." A worried teenage girl said, "All Might, where are you?" They both kept facing each other back at Tatsumaki and Psychos. Together with their psychic abilities, their auras intensified to the point where the surrounding area started to float. Yu's unconscious body was unaffected, but the abandoned cars, the building and road debris from the earlier fight, and really everything nearby were not. The first to strike was Tatsumaki. With her hands, she thrust towards Psychos' feet, shattering the concrete beneath her. Tatsumaki had the opportunity to increase the gravity around the older Esper, sending her deep into the ground, but Psychos was caught off guard. She won't be held by this. She soared as high into the air as she could after thinking, "I have to get away from any possible causality." She passed several buildings and peered down to see if Psychos was there. She didn't see her, but Saitama was the first person she saw, and he was running, very quickly. The surprise caused Tatsumaki to fly lower. She yelled, "What the? How are you running so fast, Baldy?" With a mixture of surprise and rage. Saitama stopped and raised his head. "Tatsumaki." She yelled, "And what's with the getup?" She was about to ask more questions, but then she saw you. She gestured toward the direction and said, "Never mind. We'll talk about it later. That Mount Lady hero is unconscious over there. Just go and save her." He hurried away, running even faster than Tatsumaki could see, saying, Right. Thanks." Tatsumaki felt Psychos approaching before she could question this sudden power, and it passed right under her. Despite their great distance from one another, Psychos closed it almost instantly, and Tatsumaki answered. When they clashed, the two of them pushed back against one another. They stared at one another for a few seconds before moving blindingly quickly in opposition to one another. They were pushed back after they both crashed into one another. However, they continued to fight, but each time they did, they experienced the same pushback. Despite the sunlight and the loud booms as they continued to battle, their various colors were visible from the ground. Psychos was struck in the face by Tatsumaki. Psychos lost control after being launched several meters into the air. As she looked ahead, she saw Tatsumaki pursuing her, and they soon got into a fistfight. Tatsumaki quickly punched Psychos, who retaliated with punches of her own. She was being pushed back and struck a few times by the green-haired girl, despite the fact that she was taller. She made a few hits herself and retaliated with punches of her own. That didn't stop any of them. Tatsumaki and Psychos continued to strike each other, striking each other in the stomach, faces, and chest while still letting it all out. They were also incredibly fast physically. In addition, they made amazing grunts and battle cries while fighting. Because of their speed, strong winds would form as they moved from one place to another without pausing for a second to oppose one another. Tatsumaki managed to push Psychos' back with a punch. Before she could get back into the air, Tatsumaki soared over her and stomped hard down her stomach. Psychos was sent down after he cried out from the impact. Psychos seized the opportunity to reclaim her position and take off. The girl stomped down on her back from above, sending her down again just as she was about to search for Tatsumaki. It was just in time that Psychos turned around. She successfully sent Tatsumaki flying up with a punch to her right side. Then she flew after her to give her another punch. Before any damage could be done, Tatsumaki was able to recover in time and punch her in the face. Psychos was now the one who was hurled into the air. When the older Esper stopped, Tatsumaki followed and gave her a stomp kick in the stomach. Psycho's was sent flying once more, and when Tatsumaki flew at her and punched her in the face, it only got worse for her. Tatsumaki was starting to win the battle. It was far from over, though, as Tatsumaki immediately followed Psycho's as she recovered and flew higher. They exchanged a single blow that knocked them back when she matched her speed, but not enough to throw any of them off course. It was a fierce battle that continued to intensify. In one way or another, the two females harbored resentment toward one another. They accidentally grabbed both of their hands as they flew at each other once more and engaged in a wrestling match in the air while still in motion. When Tatsumaki kicked Psycho's in the stomach, it was she who put an end to it. The other Esper responded by speeding up and taking off. Tatsumaki trailed behind her, and before long, neither of them was visible. All that was visible of them were loud rapid booms above the city, and fleeting flashes of the colors of their aura. All the monsters and heroes engaged in combat in the city stopped. From the subterranean king engaging in a one-on-one conflict with Yukyu, the dragon hero, to Kamui Woods and a band of heroes battling the seafolk. They noticed the bottle's signs when they looked up. Looking up, All Might asked, "What is that?" He could make up the fleeting flashes over the city, unlike most heroes. "Is that Tatsumaki?" Gale Wind gave a stern look in return. "Looks like Psycho's is fighting the Esper." He said, "I never thought she would. Hellfire Flame. But the more I look at it, the longer it seems like the both of them are pulling their punches." Hearing this, All Might was a little alarmed, but remained silent. As a pro hero and a teacher, I cannot allow a student to battle a villain alone. However, he glanced at Hellfire Flame and Gale Wind. "I've been busy here with these two. Before more lives are lost, I must act quickly to put an end to this monster invasion." His eyes went blue at that thought, and he inhaled deeply. "I am the symbol of peace, after all." The UA students, meanwhile, were observing the battle from one of the campus's hidden bunkers. Knowing that protecting the student was their top priority, UA made sure to be ready for anything. Luckily, nobody was hurt. On a huge screen, everyone in the room watched the fight. Since teachers had very little authority outside of the classroom, the screen was initially intended to be used in the event that the Prime Minister or other significant figures needed to consult the students on any matter. On the other hand, the day was intense and full of spectacle. "Wow, who would have thought Tatsumaki was so fast?" Momo replied. Ajiro lifted his fists to his chest and smiled. "All right, so that's the true ability of an Esper. The camera can't even follow up." Tenya spoke from his thoughts. "Well, I knew Tatsumaki was strong, but who would have guessed it was this much? She might as well be the strongest in the school. To go up against a villain of equal strength is quite unexpected." "I know, right," said Ochako. "Come on, Tatsumaki, you can do this. Beat her and win." Every student in attendance started to imitate her. As each student offered their own expression of support, different voices of encouragement reverberated throughout the bunker. Katsuki and a few others were the only ones who chose to remain silent, simply averting their eyes. Ectoplasm questioned, "Should we let them see this?" He stood behind a railing and above everyone else on a platform with 3 other educators. "I assumed the principal would have kept Tatsumaki in line. When everything is settled, I fear things won't go well." Present Mike leaned on the railing and said, "Yeah, it probably won't. But we can't leave here right now. That Psycho's has those monsters taking every hero's attention that I don't think anyone can stop her. Besides, with the level of power she's displaying right now, I don't think anyone but the top 10 heroes can beat her. We can only hope that All Might or the Caped Baldy intervenes." Vlad King crossed his arms over his chest and said, "I agree. We have to watch over the students we have here. When the principal arrives, maybe we can talk about a new plan." Some of our staff was already beaten by the hero hunter. Fortunately, Recovery Girl was able to gain consciousness. She's currently treating them, but even she has her limits due to her age. The fight continued back at the battlefield. She turned and stopped to look at Psycho's as she was taking off, with Tatsumaki right behind her. "Look like you've become quite a hero, Tatsumaki. Can you hear the cheers of the people?" she yelled. Suspicious, Tatsumaki halted and observed the Esper lifting her hands to the sky. "Now show me if you can save them." Before anyone could speak, a massive lightning strike struck the city's square as the clouds abruptly grew darker. When the enormous bolt came for them, many of them were watching the battle on the enormous screen. Most of them believed their lives were over as they watched in horror. Luckily, a green shield above them collided with the bolt. They turned in response to a loud moan and discovered Tatsumaki standing in the same street as them. She kept her shield active by holding her hands up until the lightning stopped and she lowered them. She exclaimed, "Is everyone okay?" The crowd started to applaud. That was more than sufficient to express their happiness and relief at being alive and saved by her. Numerous individuals expressed their gratitude in a variety of ways, which were only reinforced by additional compliments. But two words, spoken by a young girl in her mother's arms, sprang out the most. "Tatsumaki, look out." After taking a punch to the face, the Esper flew back. Her body tipped over twice before she used her quirk to get back on her feet. As Psychos descended to trample her, Tatsumaki leapt to her defense and kicked her. Psychos anticipated it and used her wrist to block her. Psychos tried to punch Tatsumaki twice, but she managed to avoid him by landing on the ground just in time. She flew up at Psychos' face and gave her two kicks when she saw an opening. Psychos successfully avoided both attempts. Before the insane villain could strike Tatsumaki, she had to get out of her way. With her fists lowering for the woman, she swung at her when she saw her opportunity again. It didn't go as well as she had hoped, though. Psychos smiled and took hold of her wrists. She looked directly at Tatsumaki, who widened her psychic sphere in rage. With a collision that only sent them both to the ground a few feet apart, Psychos imitated her. Both Tatsumaki and Psychos leapt back up and kicked one another. The two kicks collided, but Tatsumaki took advantage of the moment to take off, Psychos trailing behind. Both Espers flew past buildings, and when they saw skyscrapers, they even soared. Tatsumaki was careful not to approach the insane Esper. Every time they later clashed, it pushed them back and allowed them to continue flying. Even she was aware that they were putting lives in danger, but the battle was getting hotter by the second. Tatsumaki made his way to the sea and, although it wasn't so easy, managed to entice Psychos to the shore. When Psychos finally caught up to her, he kicked her in the back. Tatsumaki let out a cry of agony and started to plummet into the water. Luckily, she used her quirk to perform a front flip on the water's surface and skid back on it. Glancing up, she saw Psychos pursuing her. Tatsumaki was able to escalate the conflict because it was far from civilians. However, she wasn't alone in thinking that. Water tentacles encircled her wrists, ankles, and stomach, taking her by surprise as they started to consume her body. She was about to be drowned when a ball of water formed around her head. She started to have trouble. "Shit, what on earth is this? I'm going out of breath." Speaking through their psychic minds, Psychos declared, "Those, my dear ex-pet, are caused by me." She floated casually down to stop above her, and Tatsumaki watched. "Did you really believe that bringing me here would prevent the inevitable? You still have a lot to learn. In the next life, perhaps." "Damn, Psychos, damn you." Tatsumaki let out a mental scream, but it had no effect. Before she knew it, she was sucked into the sea, where her eyes closed and everything turned black as she started to lose consciousness. Psychos said, "I guess that's that." She felt a little let down. The news station helicopter hovered nearby, observing her. "I'm kind of disappointed. I was expecting a bit more from her. Maybe I can take my frustration on one of her friends. Ah yes, I think I'll go for the one named Ochako Uraraka." Ochako's gaze expanded. She was frightened when the villain mentioned her name. Everyone there heard the sentiments, and the teachers started to worry that the Esper would visit the bunker. Tatsumaki's eyes suddenly opened, revealing a vivid neon green glow. She responded with a startling display of strength. The wind increased until it started to cause problems for the helicopter while it was in the air. Just in time, Psychos looked down as he felt a sudden surge of psychic power. The sea created about 20 water tornadoes, which grew longer and wider. The biggest one was atop Tatsumaki, who commanded the other water tornadoes to attack by thrusting her hand forward. Every time they appeared, Psychos flew around them to avoid them all. The enormous smile on her face persisted even though she was in danger of being struck. She looked down at Tatsumaki to express how excited she was by the entire situation. She laughed and said, "Yes, yes, that's the way, Tatsumaki. Show me what you can do." Instead, Tatsumaki growled, causing 2 enormous water tornadoes to form in retaliation. Psychos successfully avoided them by flying higher before being struck by Tatsumaki. The green-haired Esper decided to use the water tornado to lift herself up and give Psychos a direct punch to the face. "Kya!" exclaimed Psychos. Abruptly, she regained her composure and smiled wildly. "Just kidding." She opened her palm and threw a burst of orange energy directly at the younger Esper as soon as she saw Tatsumaki approaching. She started laughing uncontrollably and exclaimed, "Here's the energy I absorbed from Demon Cyborg. Hope you enjoy it." She was mistaken just when she believed she had the Esper. When Tatsumaki ordered 2 water tornadoes to collide with the energy beam, it exploded. After a brief period of confusion, Psychos was attacked. Psychos was blinded by the speed at which Tatsumaki flew at her. She struck the older Esper in the face with her fist, then struck the Esper's chin with her knee. In response, Psychos punched her in the face. Tatsumaki kicked her in the face after avoiding it and raising her foot. The young Esper caught up to her and continued to hit her successfully even after sending Psychos flying back. Tatsumaki threw her arms down on the older Esper and yelled, "You're a fucking monster, you know. I hate you. I hate you. But let's make this clear, you big-chested bitch." Psychos was sent flying to the road by the powerful blow. Even though the entire block was deserted, those nearby could still feel the shockwave. That wasn't significant enough. When Psychos emerged from Tatsumaki's crater, she saw the Esper darting around her at breakneck speed. The girl made a green tornado in a matter of seconds. Prior to that, the wind had become extremely strong, and the current had lifted Psychos off the ground. She would never forget what transpired from that point on. Tatsumaki started to strike her in all directions. Even breaking Psychos' glasses, the green-haired Esper hit everything and left no area unaffected. There was no way for the older Esper to escape. She was not being given the opportunity to be free by Tatsumaki. Vehicles, portions of the road, streetlights, and buildings were being sucked in from outside the tornado. As the tornado grew and mixed with the clouds and dirt, their mass became irrelevant. The tornado actually got so out of control that lightning started to fly from it. In order to avoid being sucked in, the helicopter that was observing the entire scene had to move away. The entire tornado was stopped when Psychos managed to seize Tatsumaki's face. The girl then screamed as she sent 1,000 volts of lightning through her. Tatsumaki clenched her fist and bit the back of her lip. Not only did it knock Psychos to the ground when it struck his face, but it also sent a shockwave through the block. Psychos got back up and showed her the damage. She had some scratches on her body. Furthermore, her clothing was ruined, not enough to reveal any obscene aspects of her, but enough to demonstrate how difficult the beating was. She used her smiling lips to wipe away the blood from her face. Her aura danced like wildfire as Tatsumaki materialized in front of her. She yelled and punched the Esper square in the face. "You can hurt me." She struck her face once more. "You can torture me all you want." She then gave her a knee to the stomach. "But don't you ever." She took both of her hands and gave Psychos a high-flying uppercut. "And I do ever." Tatsumaki had already surpassed her before Psychos could stop her. Lay a finger on Uraraka Ochako. She then struck the older Esper with both of her fists. With the full blunt, Psychos struck the ground, but the action didn't stop there. With a fierce battle cry, Tatsumaki descended upon her and even seized her knees to put her hands on her chest. From anyone's perspective, it appeared as though a meteor was approaching Earth, but it was undeniable. The meteor was Tatsumaki, and she was spinning like a ball when she hit Psychos, causing a shockwave that destroyed everything within 10 miles. Everything that wasn't destroyed was hurled into the air. The city was still feeling the shockwave. Even the instructors and students in UA's bunkers could sense the tremors in their surroundings. Devastation and a massive hole were all that were left of the impact site after everything had subsided. People started to move toward the hole. They were supposed to take advantage of the fact that there were no police officers in the area to observe what transpired. One of them was Izuku, who forced his way to the front of the gathering crowd. "Tatsumaki!" That he exclaimed. He called out once more when he got no answer. "Tatsumaki! Tatsumaki!" With a frustrated, "Oi! I can hear you, geez," Tatsumaki answered. Everyone watched as she landed directly in front of them after floating from the hole in her typical aura. "Don't go about shouting my name like that, idiot." The audience suddenly cheered. It was an amazing sight to watch their hero come out of the hole unharmed. However, Tatsumaki chose to ignore them and listen to Izuku's speech. "Tatsumaki." Izuku wiped a tear from his eye and grinned. "I thought you were." Tatsumaki started to walk toward him and asked, "What? A goner? It'll take more than that to kill me. Let's leave this place. I have to take a shower and change my clothes." She was correct. Her clothing was nearly in ruins from the altercation and the damage she caused. Had it not been for her peculiarity, the damage could have been even more severe. Izuku was just taken aback by her apparent lack of reaction to her actions. Did her quirk still have more to it? He pondered. And Izuku grinned, right. He watched her walk past him after that. You were amazing, Tatsumaki. I never knew you had all that in you. With someone that controlled the monsters in the city, I thought you were in danger. Tatsumaki stopped moving. Monsters. She recalled the exchange that took place back at Ua between the heroes, Psychos, Garo, and Mosquito Girl. Right, she did mention that. Yeah, and it's kind of scary. They're like demon to dragon level monsters. But knowing All Might and the other heroes, they'll be able to handle them. Tatsumaki said, right, but she was deep in thought. Something is not right here. Monsters of the dragon level. Psychos only had demon level monsters when I was a prisoner in Oxform Labs. And as far as I'm aware, monsters will only follow someone if they have promising things for them or if they have some authority over them. Izuku inquired, are you okay, Tatsumaki? Why you don't have to go and face them? The heroes can handle that. With her thoughts focused on the subject, Tatsumaki uttered, no, it's not that. I never cared much about understanding monsters, but there's something wrong. For them to be so organized, it's very unsettling. Every monster I knew and meant only cared about destroying things or being the strongest. And the power they hold isn't something anyone lower than me can handle. Wait, then what you're saying is that a brilliant purple light erupted from the enormous hole she made before she could finish. The beam soared to the clouds and sent a wave through the sky that was visible for a great distance. Psycho said, quite the mind you have, Tatsumaki and Midoriya Izuku. As the light was bright, Izuku exclaimed in surprise, she knows my name. Of course, Midoriya. You see, monsters of all sizes believe in one thing. Strength. In order for one to be able to control them, that person must attain the title and power of the strongest monster on Earth. That is why, I've spent years, training and experimenting on myself until finally, I present you. After that, the light dimmed and Psychos appeared in the sky. Psychos' laugh spread widely, and 4 black wings spread out. She was around 7 feet tall, with her own monster body, dark lines in her eyes, purple unknowns on her skin, and completely altered clothing. She had changed into a black, V-necked, off-the-shoulders minidress with purple eyeballs. Behind her, at the end of the dress, was a triangular tail that reached her knees but was not real. In addition, she had triangle-shaped sleeves, purple eyeballs at her wrists, 2 above and below her butt, and an eyeball-shaped cleavage that was visible. Meet the monster that dares to defy the very boundary of a dragon-level monster to a god. Disaster level. Higher dragon. Behold the one that will bring mankind to its extinction. Tatsumaki laughed. That did not deter her. She mentally added, so you turned yourself into a monster. I've always thought of you as one. Only the fact that you don't look particularly repulsive disappoints me. Psycho simply smiled back. Tatsumaki moved forward to confront her, but Izuku stopped him. The adolescent boy worried about her. Tatsumaki, you can't. You've done enough. Let the heroes handle it. Tatsumaki wrenched her arm away from him. You haven't seen anything yet, Midoriya. Psychos remarked slyly. Oh, isn't that adorable? You've really made friends, Tatsumaki. But I kind of agree with him. Not that I can't continue or dance, I don't see any reason to go on like this. Tatsumaki screamed, so you think I'll let you go off free? Yes, you will. I'm about to pull my forces back, but if you try to attack me now, I'll deploy one of my organization's cadres to visit your friends. Tell me, have you heard of the monster, Elder Centipede? Tatsumaki's gaze grew wide. No way, he's alive. Psychos laughed and added, and well, I should add. Izuku was taken aback by the information. He knew from studying heroes that Elder Centipede was a monster not to be taken lightly, even though most people were unaware of the creature she was referring to. Right now as we speak, I have him underneath UA's bunker. Tatsumaki and Izuku, as well as the students and teachers, were sufficiently alarmed by those words. Just one telepathic command and he'll break through the bunker and eat them all. I should add for the students and teachers watching this that trying to leave will just trigger him. He's like a shark waiting for the first human to walk out. I'll leave them alone, exclaimed Izuku. Looking at him gravely, Tatsumaki said, keep it down, Midoriya. Do you know who Elder Centipede is? Izuku was uncomfortable saying, yes, I do. He's described as an incarnation of calamity. He devours anything that's in his path, whether it's an island, a village or a whole city. Heroes have died trying to beat him, and yet he still lives after so long. That is why, he stopped and began to scream at Psychos. They have nothing to do with you. Why? Why do you do this? Saiko's gaze shifted to him, and she fell to the ground, asking, why do I do this? I guess it goes back years before you were even conceived. Tatsumaki questioned, what are you talking about? So what if you used to be a student in UA? You're just a monster of a dropout now. Saiko's continued by saying, true, but there's more to it. You see, I was just like you, minus the circumstances that put you there. I once dreamed on being a representation to espers in a world that either hunted them down or thought they didn't exist. Izuku said, hunted them down. Saiko's only said, all will be revealed in due time. Back then I knew that the road towards that dream won't be easy. Fortunately, I had friends in the form of the Cape Baldy and Mount Lady, both of whom attended UA with me. Those were good times, but now I realize I was just blinding myself to the truth. Tatsumaki demanded, the truth. Stop being so vague, and explain yourself. The truth that humanity is a failed species. All we've done is indulge ourselves in unworthy and tasteless things. I've seen the future thanks to a psychic ability I unlocked, and I saw that when it comes, humanity, as a species, can't beat it, not because he holds power unlike any seen before, but because humanity couldn't put away their differences to join forces and stop it. The Earth is doomed. Fortunately, I shall save it by destroying the very obstacle responsible for that grim future. Humanity. Tatsumaki yelled, what the hell are you talking? Saiko's grinned, everything shall be revealed in due time, Tatsumaki. Until then, enjoy the false hope you've made yourself to believe. Tatsumaki snarled, then why did you attack the school? Tell me that. Saiko's continued, I guess I can disclose that. I went over to UA to obtain information on the teachers and students, specifically on their quirks. Thankfully, the video I put out involving Tatsumaki and Demon Cyborg was enough to cause such an emotional doubt and fear in you that I was able to walk in and out of the school without your detection. Tatsumaki screamed angrily, you're the one who video it. Saiko's was happy to acknowledge, indeed. It would have been a problem if you were able to sense my presence, so I figured that putting that video out would be more than enough to distract. I thank UA's student body for making the opportunity possible. In essence, Saiko's thanked the students for their skepticism regarding the esper in his statement. Peer pressure was difficult for teenagers to deal with, and as a result, it had a way of impairing judgment, which was precisely Saiko's goal at the time. Although the students were not pleased to hear it, the action had already been completed. Saiko's continued, and now I have what I came for. Imagine my surprise when I found out some interesting things awaiting you, Tatsumaki. Angrily, she said, then how about you tell me what they are? What, and ruin the surprise? Come on, Tatsumaki, you have to at least be interested in seeing what's waiting for you. No, that's okay, I guess we'll wrap things up from here. A deep male voice asked, so that's all you have to say, villain. Saiko's was engulfed by a massive fall of fire before anyone could notice it. When Tatsumaki and everyone else looked in the direction it had come from, they noticed a burly man walking in their direction. Although he was dressed as a hero, his mustache, beard, and eyebrows, all of which were flames, were what really set him apart. The hero frowned slightly and said, if you have nothing else to say, then just burn. The sight of the well-known hero on the scene confused everyone in the audience. Even though he was currently in a city far from his base of operations, he was there to attack the enigmatic esper. Tatsumaki was perplexed as the crowd shared. She didn't know who the hero was because she had been criticizing heroes. She said, okay. Who is he? Startled, Izuku turned to her and said, what? You don't know. He looked away, shuddering at the sight of her glaring eyes. That Endeavor aka the Flaming Hero. He's the number 2 pro hero, right behind All Might. Endeavor gave Izuku a fierce look. The teenager shuddered, but it wasn't to hurt him. However, Saiko's wings spread out and flapped, releasing a strong wind before anyone could notice. The wind was so strong that everyone there was nearly carried away. Tatsumaki and Endeavor were the only ones who did not encounter any issues with the power display. Upon turning to face Saiko's, they all noticed her standing there grinning. Endeavor said, everyone, leave here immediately. Instead, it wasn't really necessary to tell anyone twice. Everyone in the crowd wanted to escape, so they started running in a panic. Tatsumaki was the only one who disobeyed, but she quickly felt Izuku take hold of her hand. He started to flee while holding her before she could object. He yelled, come on. We have to get out of here. Tatsumaki's mouth opened. He was holding her hand once more, and she wanted to mention it. She actually wished to remind him of her earlier cautions against doing so. However, she chose to follow him after closing her mouth and blushing a little. "I'm back with psychos," she said, turning to face Endeavor. "Always being the considerate hero, Endeavor. I always idolize your power as a child. Mind showing me if I was right to do so?" Endeavor growled, "I'm no monster's plaything." "You sure of that?" Endeavor broke. With his own lightning speed, he started hurling fireballs at psychos. But none of them reached the malevolent Esper. The pro hero stopped when they touched it because of her aura, which made them vanish. Don't tell me that's. Endeavor wished she would not finish. The pro hero leapt to his feet and clasped his hands together. He then aimed a long burst of blue flame directly at the malevolent Esper. Psychos could only gaze at the approaching fire for a few seconds. It swallowed her up in a matter of seconds before Endeavor hit the earth. Did that work? He pondered. Nope. Endeavor turned to back as his fighting instincts took over. He attempted to punch the evil Esper in the face before meeting her gaze, but his fist was caught in her hand. With a smile on his face, Endeavor sprayed psychos with blue flame. His flames produced a far more intense heat than the average. He melted the path it took until he cooled it down after passing psychos. Despite his best efforts, he discovered that his fist was still being held. Psycho's smile. She threw the flaming hero over her as the fire on her went out. The force of her throw caused Endeavor to tumble several times before he managed to get to his feet. He snarled as he looked forward, but even then, he skidded back. Nothing changed as a result of his response. Psychos appeared in front of him out of nowhere, and before he knew it, she flicked her finger at his forehead. That alone sent him hurtling through tons of rubble, a mile from where they had been, until he finally stopped. With a growl, Endeavor stood up. The flames shooting out of his feet caused him to leap high in the air, and he came down directly for Psychos. He gave a battle cry, his fists turning blue with fire, prepared to give Psychos the most intense flaming bath she would ever experience. It didn't wait for Psychos. His speed was amazing, but it was nothing in comparison to hers. To his amazement, she vanished as a mist before he arrived to retrieve her. However, he struck the spot where she had been standing and slammed his fist into the floor. The shockwave of fire that erupted was amazing. The pro hero rose as everything in its path melted and everything was a complete mess. He turned back to her after feeling Psychos behind him. But it was already too late. She chopped him right at the neck with her left hand, a cheerful smile on her face. Endeavor collapsed to the ground after being knocked unconscious. In the meantime, the impact by itself created a shockwave that settled down and traveled farther than Endeavor could. "Figures you wouldn't stand a chance against me. When it comes to battle compatibility, I'm the worst you could ever come up against. Even if your flames were close to the fiery surface of the Earth's core, you wouldn't even be a real challenge to me. I guess in the end you were really just my plaything." A fresh voice said, "Don't think it's over yet, Psychos." This one was well-known worldwide and was well-known. The world felt safer, more hopeful, and more at peace just by looking at the person. Psychos turned to face the voice and said, "All Might. I see Galewind and Hellfire Flame were unable to keep you occupied for long. As expected, almost no one can keep up to you when you push against your limits. So that's what you have to say. To think you were an innocent girl who wanted to make a good difference in the world. Saitama would be disappointed if he saw you like this." The mighty replied. Psychos laughed and walked away, saying, "So he has told you about me. I'll be going now. I hate wasting time. Besides, time is really all you have before you're killable." All Might questioned, "What are you talking about?" Her statement startled him a little, but he didn't show it. Psychos paused and looked in his direction. All for one sends his regards. All Might's eyes widened, and it was clear how shocked he was. Psychos merely averted his gaze and sighed. She vanished as a mist before anyone could speak, leaving All Might standing alone in confusion. The invasion ended a few hours ago. As the sun peeked over the horizon, the sea gently brushed the shore. Sitting on the bench with their socks and shoes by their sides were Izuku and Tatsumaki. Despite everything that had happened, they decided to stay for some reason, and now they were taking in the view. Izuku smiled and remarked, "It's really so peaceful, kind of makes you forget all that happened, huh?" Tatsumaki stated quite bluntly, "Yeah, but it did happen. Everyone got evacuated from the campus once everyone was sure the monsters were gone. Psychos really did call them off, but things aren't going to be the same anymore. Yeah, scowled Izuku. The beach's gentle breeze took over. Any additional noise they perceived came from the waves lapping against the coast. The breathtaking sight in front of them caused Izuku to ponder something. Tatsumaki was at his left, and he turned to face him. You're not going to go, I mean, with everything that happened, I thought that. Tatsumaki grinned, HMPH. She turned away, flushed. You really think all that would scare me away? No way, I'm staying here. Besides, she said. With the way you responded back on the rooftop, how could I? Izuku was perplexed until it dawned on him. His face turned red and flushed. He turned away and stammered in embarrassment. He said, sorry about that. With a smile, Tatsumaki got to his feet. She closed her eyes and stepped forward a few paces. Her school uniform and hair were buffeted by the wind. Don't be sorry, I guess I needed to hear that. You're one special guy, Midoriya. She replied. Izuku blushed without realizing it. However, he responded while glancing down at his knees. Me, special, I'm nowhere near you. She turned to him and asked, what do you mean? Izuku answered earnestly, you were really amazing out there. You were so fast, so strong, and so compassionate. You try to hide it, but you really care for Uraraka. I'm sure she was happy that you expressed it that way. Meanwhile, if I was in your shoe out there, I wouldn't last a second against psychos. True, you wouldn't. Heck, if you followed me to confront Garo and that monster, you would have been dead weight to me. Izuku bows his head and says, thanks for admitting that. Tatsumaki rolled her eyes after staring at him for a while. She approached him and leaned in. Get up, I want you to try out something with me. Izuku looked up at her, perplexed, and asked, what? Stand. Now. When Izuku obeyed, she took hold of his wrist. Despite his red face, Izuku allowed her to lead him toward the sea. When they were sufficiently close, she pointed to the sea with her free hand and looked forward. Use your quirk over there. Full power, she exclaimed. With a mixture of surprise and worry, Izuku exclaimed to her, what? But my arm will break if I do that. You saw what happened when I did it against you in the Heroes vs. Villains test. He saw it as Tatsumaki held up his arm. He was surprised to find a green aura enveloping his entire arm. He could see Tatsumaki's resolute face behind that. Her tone was kind as she said, just do it, stupid. Izuku nodded, enthralled by her face. She released him, took a step back, and observed what he was going to do. Izuku inhaled deeply and exhaled. Unbeknownst to him, his eyes flashed green, and then he stepped back and called forth the full power of One for All. Detroit. No, super moves. Serious series, serious smash. A strong wind sliced straight through the water by simply forcing the air, facing the sea. As a straight line extended all the way to what appeared to be the sun at the end, the very bottom of the sea was visible. Wow! Exclaimed Izuku. Tatsumaki looked at the rift he had made and said, see. You've got the power, Midoriya. You're incredibly strong, even more than you know. So if you're doubting yourself because of me, then make it your goal to surpass me. Maybe then you'll be one step closer to becoming the strongest hero. Tatsumaki. Izuku had been surprised by something about Tatsumaki. Perhaps it was her words, her relaxed posture as the sun's rays partially reflected off of her, or the slight touch of the wind. What Izuku was feeling toward her, whatever it was unknown. However, before Izuku and Tatsumaki could decipher it, they were both interrupted by the cry, here she is. It's Tatsumaki. Tatsumaki exclaimed, oh boy, and sprinted to get her shoes. Grabbing them, she fled in the opposite direction. Get your shoes, come on. Izuku stammered, all right, and retrieved his shoes. He did it just in time, as a small group of fans soon began chasing them. They were all shouting Tatsumaki's name and praising her incessantly. Tatsumaki ignored them and continued to run alongside Izuku. She exclaimed, you're able to catch up. Good. Shouldn't we just fly from here? I mean, you can fly and take me with you, and then what would be the point of training you? Surprised, Izuku asked, training? Yup, this is your first step to surpass me. But let's use our quirks from here on out. The first to reach the end of the beach wins. Ready? Wait, Tatsumaki, set, are you listening? Go. Tatsumaki ran off more quickly after activating her quirk. Taken by surprise, Izuku quickly used his own. Both of them moved quickly enough to completely escape the crowd. Izuku was a little surprised when Tatsumaki burst out laughing. However, he smiled at her happiness and soon started laughing as well. Tatsumaki mused to herself, Midoriya. It's likely that we won't experience these moments in the future. However, I want to know that you will have the strength to move forward in the face of any challenges or a bleak future. Be the hero you desire to be, and perhaps I will believe in becoming one as well. As a result, they continued to run together, enjoying their time together. In all honesty, they didn't give a damn about a winner. They wouldn't want it any other way because this was the first time they were enjoying each other. Hours went by, until the very late hour of 10 a.m. There was a large, dark room beneath the League of Villains headquarters. The big door was opened a moment later, and two people entered. One voice said, "So Psychos thinks she can do whatever she wants, huh?" With hands on his face and other areas of his body, his skin was especially blue. He started to scratch his neck with his own hand. I don't know why we should still be working with her, but I don't like it. That hero hunter stole my spotlight, which annoys me even more. I quite agree, the hazy man beside him said. Kurogiri was his name, and as they continued, they heard him munching loudly. The leader of the League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki, said, grinning strangely, Nomu. Nomu noticed the two people when he looked up from his chair. He had a piece of meat in his hands and blood was all over his mouth. Then he got to his feet and saw them both approach him. I've kept him well fed by the meantime. He seems to enjoy animal meat like lions and elephants, explained Kurogiri. Tamura moved closer to him after saying, I don't care. The fact the woman helped to create him is already enough. Just wait a bit longer, Nomu. You'll soon get your chance to kill All Might, and when that's done, perhaps you can deal with that pesky Psychos and the hero hunter. No one will stand in the League of Villains, especially the Esper of UA. The meat was tossed in Nomu's hands. Even though Tamura and Kurogiri were fortunate enough to cover their ears in time, the shaking beneath their feet continued as he unleashed an ear-piercing roar unlike any before he used his extraordinary power. Name: Nomu. Level of disaster: Unknown Dragon. A peek, a peek, a peek. With a sigh, Saitama placed his elbow on his lap and gripped his hands together. Only a few hours had gone by since the Psychos incident, and the fallout wasn't great. In addition to you, also known as Mount Lady, being on life support while resting on a hospital bed, the entire world was in a state of agitation. Psychos abruptly called off every monster that had been tearing through the city. Even though no one witnessed the Esper's actions, it became clear as soon as she felt the scene following her dark revelations. Now, Ua was distrustful due to the hero hunter and Psychos' infiltration as well as the rumors of spies inside the organization. Psychos, what have you done? Saitama used rhetoric in his thinking. Seeing the pro-hero depressed was extremely uncommon. At this point, most people knew that he had some connection to Psychos and Mount Lady and that he reacted little or not at all to certain situations. Saitama was concerned for a reason: nothing would be the same. But then he felt a familiar presence by the doorway, and the moment changed. He spoke without turning around. I was wondering when you'll show up. I bet you have questions for me, Tatsumaki. Despite not saying anything, the green-haired Esper's expression conveyed it. Saitama sighed and got to his feet. The pro-hero was alone because Genos had gone off somewhere to get paid. But that didn't mean he was concerned. However, he was also aware that their relationship would change. They arrived at the top of the hospital a few minutes later. Given the gravity of the revelation he had to make to the Esper, Saitama preferred it that way. He then filled her in on everything, including his early years in UA and his status as the third-rank pro-hero. So it's all your fault, screamed Tatsumaki. It's because of you I went through the hell I did. And because of you, Psychos was able to create the Monster Association and endanger everyone's life. Here I thought heroes were so reckless, when in reality the most reckless one is you, Saitama. The guilt made the caped Baldy wince a little. It hurt even though he hoped Tatsumaki would use his name more often because this was the first time he had heard her say it. Why didn't you just kill her right there? That's what I don't get. She almost killed your friend, and you let her get away. I don't care if she turned good at that very moment. That monster is the cause of my awful childhood. The details of her early years were there. Before she was her neighbor, Saitama didn't know anything about her. The young girl wasn't even certain when he asked Fubuki. She felt as though those memories had been erased for her. Tatsumaki was alluding to Saitama's conflict with Psychos during those years once more. Saitama had the opportunity to take her own life in order to prevent everything that had occurred with Garo and the Monster Association from ever happening. However, he had let her go for personal reasons, and now he was being pursued by the consequences of his choice. Saitama chose to reply with a somber and understanding expression. I don't know what happened in your childhood, but I can guess psychos caused so much pain to you. I know this won't fix anything, but just so you know, I'm very sorry. You're right, everything that happened today is because of my own action back then. I was so clouded by the memories psychos and I shared that I couldn't bring myself to kill her. And yet, I don't regret it one bit. Tatsumaki let out a growl, but Saitama spoke before she could. Psychos had my back when she was good. She was one of the very few people I could trust to be there for me. I know that doesn't change whatever she did to you afterwards, but let me ask you something. If you knew Fubuki would turn out to become a monster like Psychos, and you had the very chance to kill her, would you take it or let her become that way? Tatsumaki shot back, that's crazy. Fubuki will never become like Psychos. I know, right? That was the same thing I thought when I was young, and yet, I was so unprepared to take her life. Saitama went on to clarify. To kill a loved one is the hardest thing to do. People won't even think about it in their entire lifetime, but the unlucky few, people like me, were not ready for it. Besides, you're asking a kid who barely knew his own strength to kill his best friend. So let me ask again, Tatsumaki. If that person was Fubuki, would you kill her in an instant? Tatsumaki was about to respond. Her younger sister could never turn evil like Psychos. In fact, she wanted to send Saitama flying at the mere thought. However, she felt trapped as she stared into his solemn eyes and turned away. She had never seen Saitama so solemn in all the years. With a sigh, Saitama started to walk away. This isn't to make you feel some guilt. I'm just trying to let you can understand what it truly means to take out a life. You tried killing Genos that one time, but I never brought it up. Anyway, don't worry about Psychos. I'll make sure Psychos and Garo are taken down, for good. Tatsumaki noticed Saitama's back as she glanced at him. She could feel so many emotions from him that it nearly choked her, even though she couldn't see his face. Because she lived next door to the Baldy, she mistakenly believed she knew him. The pro hero that was ranked number 3 was much more than that. Yu's mouth let out a feeble moan as her eyes slowly opened. It was difficult for her to hear the voices until her ears adjusted properly. Her father and mother were the first people she saw, and the former held her hand while tears streamed down her cheek. Mum, Dad, you're both here, Yu uttered feebly. Every time she spoke, some fog would form because of the oxygen mask covering her mouth and nose. Her mother said, yes, we're here, dearie. We saw what happened. You were so brave out there, but take it easy now. You're going to be all right. Her father concurred, saying, she's right. Everything is going to be fine. A fresh yet recognizable voice said, no, she's not. Why lie to her? Yu's eyes grew as wide as they could. It had been years since she had heard that female voice. She turned to her left, toward the wall where the voice originated, because she believed her hearing was tricking her. Young Psychos gave her a kind smile. Long time no see, Yu. Yu was taken aback. Standing inside, Psychos appeared to be a perfect replica of her younger self. But instead of feeling threatened or tense, Yu experienced the friendly camaraderie of an old friend, something she hadn't experienced from Psychos in a long time. Young Psychos touched her lip with her index finger. Yu was motioned to remain silent, and the pro hero complied. Then she approached the blonde and put her hand in hers. Yu was shocked to feel her friend's warm hands. You won't understand things now, but you will when you eventually let go. Psychos replied. Yu said, let go. Her parents and the doctor were alerted by her response, but she ignored them. What do you mean? I don't understand. Young Psychos found it difficult to say the words. After choking several times, she turned her head away. You're dying, Yu. I'm so sorry. This time, Yu's eyes widened even more. She couldn't help but repeat those words because she felt her heart skip a beat. She said, I'm dying. What? Exclaimed Yu's mother. The father faced the doctor once more. What is the meaning of this? Yu never mentioned that she was dying. The doctor turned to Yu and said, I'm sorry, sir, but I was going to tell you soon after. How did she know that? I'm sorry to say, but your daughter sustained too much damage to her internal organs. That includes certain parts of the brain. As I'm speaking you now, Certain functions in her body are shutting down. I'm sorry. What Yu's mother heard was too much for her to handle. She let out a cry, shedding tears as she collapsed to her knees. On the other hand, her husband's face showed that he was too shocked to do anything. Yu made the decision to console her parents because she was aware of their grief. She extended her hand to her mother's hand resting on the hospital bed railing. Her mother said that the touch was sufficient to capture her interest. She turned to face her father after saying, "Mum, please don't cry. I'm still here, and that includes you. Let's not focus on that right now. At least, before I go, let my last moment be with your smiling faces." She grinned. "I'm sorry if I'm being selfish." Her mother said, "No, you're right," and got back up. Despite the tears still streaming down her face, she smiled as she held her daughter's hand. "I love you, you. Just know that I don't regret allowing you to be a hero. You did great out there. I'm proud of the woman you became." Her father concurred, saying, "I'm with your mother. You used to be so stuck up at times, but I knew you were a true hero all the same. Thank you for being our wonderful daughter." Yu grinned and said, "I." Suddenly, her other hand was being held. She continued to smile as she turned to face young Psychos and noticed the girl with the purple hair. "How, Psychos," the young one, bows her head. "How can you smile like that? It's my fault that you're." "It wasn't really your fault. I blamed myself for it, but doing that now won't change the past, would it?" Young Psychos shot back, but tears were streaming down her face. "But you can hate me for all you want," she said. "I don't mind it at all. Hate me, call me names. That side of me you met back then is still me. So please just hate me this once." She was no longer able to suppress the pain. Her face was buried on the back of Yu's hand as she collapsed to her knees. After observing her for a short while, Yu took her hand away. After a moment of surprise, young Psychos felt a pat on her head. Yu was able to say, "Yada, I always wanted to do that. Thank you." Lost in her attitude, young Psychos gazed up at her friend. She quickly changed her attitude and got to her feet. "You really have changed, huh, Yu? If it were the old times, I'm sure you would have scolded me more from it." "You're right." Yu was able to laugh out loud. "Thank you for remembering." Despite her feeble smile, young Psychos' eyes were still filled with sadness. The doctor and Yu's parents were perplexed as to who the young woman was speaking to during their conversation. However, the atmosphere didn't shift until Saitama appeared at the doorway. Saitama said nonchalantly, "What's going on? Is Yu awake?" and entered. He flicked his finger away after pushing it into his ear to retrieve something. Yu told him, "Still the same as usual, huh, Saitama? How many times did I have to tell you to stop doing that?" The straightforward response from Saitama was, "I don't know. I lost count." He focused on Yu and greeted the doctor and Yu's parents. He could tell something wasn't right by the expressions on their faces. Anyway, he proceeded to take a seat beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Pretty good." Saitama looked around and shrugged his shoulders, saying, "That's kind of weird to say, but whatever." He looked sad as he sighed. "Looks like I forgot to bring that fruit basket." Yu laughed and said, "Really? I would have liked to have some." "So what now?" replied Saitama. "I mean, the doctor is here, and clearly I missed out on whatever you guys were talking about. Are you going to go back to being a pro hero?" Yu stopped and turned to face the ceiling. "A pro hero? No, I think I'm done. I'm aiming for somewhere else, somewhere that you can't come with me." "Then I'm sure you're going to be fine." Yu turned back to Saitama and asked, "You think so?" Saitama replied with a feeble smile, "Yeah. Ever since we met, you've been a great help to Psychos and I. I never told you this, but I kind of looked up to you back in those days. Your resolve, your determination, and your motivation made me feel that I can keep going. Weird, isn't it?" She grinned once more and said, "No, I don't think so. I think that's really great, to know what I meant to you, Saitama. Thank you for everything, Saitama." Saitama grinned broadly and laughed, saying, "I should be the one to say that." Yu stopped to consider where she saw young Psychos. That was okay, but she was nowhere to be seen. She said, turning back to face Saitama, "By the way, I hope you're not blaming yourself for what happened with me and the hero hunter. This is fine. Thanks to that, I was able to finally come out of my shell." When Saitama said, "I guess so," her smile faded a little. "But I've got to stop him somehow, before he does this again." "I know you will. You're my hero, Cape Baldy. Saitama's expression conveyed his surprise. It was because she showed him how much she cared and how grateful she was, not because she called him his superhero name. You could feel her heart thinning, but she couldn't stop laughing. She found his expression amusing and felt somewhat comfortable around him. Hey, Saitama, can you lean close? There's a favor I need from you. In response, Saitama said, sure. Leaning toward her face, he got up from his chair. Yu recognized her opportunity. She was finally looking directly into the eyes of the young man she had loved since childhood. Even though she was now on the verge of death, she could not let this opportunity pass her by. She said, now, remove the oxygen mask. But, she pleaded, Saitama, please. Despite his reluctance, the Cape Baldy went ahead. He was a little surprised when Yu pushed her head up and gave him a direct kiss on the lips after he took off the mask. Only a few seconds passed before she leaned back on her pillow and gently touched his hand on the railing of the hospital bed. Yu smiled and interrupted. Thank you, Saitama. At least now I can go away with that. Saitama couldn't think of the right answer. It had been a long time since he had revealed his true feelings to anyone. However, he stood up straight and grinned as he heard the heart monitor's sound decreasing. You should rest up now, Yu. Mind if I cover you? It'll be bad if you catch a cold, he stated. Hi, Yu said, closing her eyes and nodding. With a nod in return, Saitama covered herself with the bed's cover. However, he stopped and looked at her one last time before covering her entire body. She said, I always did love you, Saitama. I love you too, Yu. He finally acknowledged his affections. Neither of them regretted their emotions now. The heart monitor beeped loudly as soon as Saitama covered her body with the cover. Until the doctor unplugged the machine and checked his wristwatch, it was the only sound in the room. He declared, time of death, 4:39 p.m. On her husband's chest, Yu's mother sobbed aloud. The elderly man was only able to embrace her and gaze at the corpse of his daughter, tears welling up in his eyes. Saitama, meanwhile, stood silently and left the room. No one looked at him before he left, and no one spoke to him. Tatsumaki seized Genos's wrist by the wrist. The cyborg had been restored, but it had a new appearance. It wasn't his moment, though. He noticed a somber expression on Tatsumaki's face as he looked down at her by his side. Tatsumaki said solemnly, someone just died. I can sense their spirit leaving this place. Genos glanced at his master's back as he left, understanding. As a cyborg, he could only comprehend a certain number of human concepts. However, he was aware of how much Yu meant to him and felt a certain amount of pity for the bald hero. Without a word, he walked in silence, talking about the hero. Every moment he spent thinking about the memories he had of Yu and Psychos in particular. He recollected their time together, the day they made the decision to work as a team, the numerous times he ended up in Recovery Girls' Clinic, and the times he and Yu spent by themselves. He was opening the hospital's rooftop door before he realized it. It didn't alter his feelings or his next course of action. As he reached the rooftop's edge, he felt tears streaming down his cheeks as he watched the sun set. He nearly choked as he opened his mouth to speak. He inhaled deeply, exhaled, and then uttered the two words that were on his mind. It was, goodbye, Yu. Yu's ghost closed her eyes and grinned. Despite her death, she expressed her own words and acknowledged Saitama's sorrow. Farewell, Saitama. Good luck out there. The most significant story of the evening and the following day would be her passing. They would look up to Mount Lady as the spark that ignited their hope during a period when many were questioning the abilities of their heroes. Mount Lady would always be known as the symbol of hope, if All Might was the symbol of peace, and Garo was the symbol of fear. A week later, a statue will be erected in her honor, and many people of all ages will look up to her in hopes of a brighter future. Tatsumaki let out a frustrated groan. She was trying to sleep when someone kept hammering at the door of her apartment. She was in her futon, dressed in white pajamas with green spots. Even though he and her sister weren't the richest, they managed to live comfortably in an apartment that was nearly identical to Saitama's. If only someone could handle the banging now. Fubuki said, Big sister, can you get that? From the shower. Tatsumaki pushed herself up, growling. That person, whoever they were, had better be prepared to defend themselves. The Esper marched over to the door, forgetting what she was wearing, because she was so furious with whoever had knocked. Opening the door, Tatsumaki yelled, What do you want? Cameras and microphones were pressed up against her face, and she quickly regretted it. The fact that she was exposed to camera flashes and had to cover her face out of habit didn't help either. Tatsumaki, how are you feeling after your battle with psychos? Tatsumaki, is this really where you live? Tatsumaki, have you really been taught under the Cape Baldi? Tatsumaki was barely able to control herself. The embarrassment was making her face flush. Additionally, it caused her to activate her quirk, which led to a lot of nasty thoughts running through her head. Surprisingly, though, she never pursued any of them. She swam straight at the reporter's equipment after floating back. She didn't care that the slam's damages were acknowledged. Just as her younger sister emerged in a towel, she deactivated her quirk and floated down. Wow, what just happened? Tatsumaki pinched her nose and sighed. She turned away and went to the balcony after saying, "Our new life, apparently. I'm going to get some fresh air. Lock the door and make sure no one gets in." Okay. Her sister was perplexed, which makes sense. However, Tatsumaki needed to collect herself before she did something she might later come to regret. She went to the balcony because it sounded nice to take a moment there, but she was taken aback. Through a ladder, someone managed to get on it. Both Tatsumaki and the man who waved at her with a smile blinked. "Hi, I'm your biggest fan. You have no idea how." Tatsumaki didn't listen to him. She triggered her quirk and lifted her finger at the ladder. The ladder's steps snapped apart in an instant, and the man screamed as he slid down. Tatsumaki then proceeded to her balcony railing and noticed a large group of people watching. "Look, it's Tatsumaki. We love you, Tatsumaki. OMG, what a cute pajamas she's wearing." She blushed at that last part. She was also reminded that her pajamas were still on. She dashed back inside her house and shut the curtains and the balcony door. She would have done something somewhat damaging to the intruders if she had been this person months ago. It was Tatsumaki who muttered, What? Fubuki inquired. She was getting dressed when she saw her sister standing with her back to her at the curtains. Tatsumaki shouted as he turned around. "We're moving." A peek. Saitama gripped his elbow with his hands and sighed. The incident involving psychos and the Monster Association was just yesterday. He would have pursued psychos and put an end to everything if it weren't for his concerns about his childhood friend. But here he was, a little remorseful, keeping watch over his unconscious companion since the event. Saitama clenched his hands together and said, "This is my fault." "Idiot." Saitama was relieved as she looked up. You had a tiny, comforting smile on her face as she gazed at him. Her forehead was covered in bandages, some of which were concealed beneath her hospital gown. She was struggling to sit up, but she appeared fine despite the hero hunter having done a lot to her. Through a smile, Saitama said, You're okay." She sat up and said, "Of course, I am." However, the slight pain in her abdomen and chest had made it difficult. "I haven't gotten to make it big yet, but I don't feel as bad as I should be from that fight." "Oh yeah, about that. That old lady from Ua came and healed you up. What was her name?" "Recon lady. It's Recovery Girl." When Saitama remembered, he snapped his finger. "Oh right." Yu laughed and rolled her eyes. "You really haven't changed all that much, Saitama?" Saitama answered, "I don't know. I have changed quite a bit." "Why, yeah," she recalled. "Psychos, what happened to psychos while I was knocked out? Is Tatsumaki okay? Please tell me that you handled it." Saitama rose and said, "No, I didn't. I was so worried about you that I forgot to go back and take on psychos. Tatsumaki should be fine. She's a strong girl if you didn't know. But that was psychos. How long have you been here? We have to get back to the fight now." It's tomorrow. You've been unconscious since yesterday." Yu became silent in surprise. "Is that so? I really did fail back then." She gripped the bed's cover with regret. Saitama grinned slightly and said, "I wouldn't say that. A lot of people are grateful for what you did, Takayama. If you had woken up sooner, you would have seen the get well cards and gifts they sent to you. It almost crowded the whole room if I hadn't just told the hospital staff to have them sent straight to your house." Surprised, Yu asked, "Really?" Saitama patted her head and nodded, "Yep. You did good, Kohai. But next time, call me before you go and do something so reckless." Yu reddened with rage. "I'm not a kid anymore." "I know." At that moment, someone knocked on the door. It brought the two former classmates' attention to the man standing there and broke up their conversation. They were shocked to see someone they hadn't seen in a long time. Am I interrupting something? No way, says Yu. Saitama's eyes widened slightly. King, the ex-pro hero entered and grinned broadly. Hey, kids, long time no see. Line break. Izuku was using a dumbbell to work out his right arm while seated on the couch. He had continued to train his muscles ever since he was given All Might's hair. Izuku's main issue at the moment was that One for All required its users to be extremely physically fit. Surprisingly, though, he wasn't worried about it at the moment. He was viewing a real-time feed of Tatsumaki's house, which was also Saitama's. Apparently, someone had given the media a leak about the two people's home. His thoughts therefore strayed to their own thoughts while he watched a female reporter speak. Izuku thought, Tatsumaki isn't exactly having it easy, huh? Students were instructed to remain at home as UA classes were cancelled until repairs and safety precautions were completed. Since that day, heroes have continued to patrol the streets. Nobody can hold UA or any hero responsible for what transpired. Even the government was caught off guard by psychos. It was terrifying how many monsters there were that day. Anyway, he said, carrying on his thought. I hope all is well with her. Even though I know I shouldn't worry about yesterday too much, I still wish I could have helped. Tatsumaki has been under a lot of stress lately. If only there was a means of assisting her. Izuku, Mum. Izuku gave a sudden turn. She appeared anxious. I've been calling your name for some time now. Are you feeling okay? Why yeah, I'm fine. I was just thinking about Tatsumaki. Oh, his mother smiled uncontrollably. She went to sit next to her son because she thought it would be an opportunity to learn more about his feelings. I hope everything is fine between you two. Sighing, Izuku said, it is, but I haven't been that much of a help to Tatsumaki. When she went off to face psychos, I wasn't able to catch up to her because of how I am. She expects much from me and I don't know how to make it up to her yet. His mother was already yelling with delight in her mind. I see. Her son hasn't mentioned any girls at all in the entire time she's known him. However, he was worrying about a girl who was clearly a close friend. She could still clearly recall that first day of school when the Esper took him to UA. His mother said, so you want to make it up to her? I think that's really admirable of you, Izuku. You do? He asked his mother. Yes, she replied with a kind grin. I've been noticing for a while that you've changed from the young boy I knew. I suppose Tatsumaki was responsible. Therefore, you should take her somewhere pleasant if you want to make her happy. Somewhere pleasant? I don't know if I can get that chance, Izuku said, letting out a sigh after asking. I'm not sure. You may be taken aback. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Izuku and his mother turned to face it. The bell rang again, but this time, his mother got up and approached it. Who is it? She politely inquired. A friend. When he heard that voice, Izuku got up and walked a little closer to see his mother open the door before he had a chance to see two people he knew. Tatsumaki and her sister, both wearing light green hoodies, stood there and Tatsumaki glanced past the woman in front of him to see Izuku. Hey, Midoriya, you're needed. What? It wasn't because of his kill count, or the intimidating aura he created simply by being there that the hospital room was largely silent when King entered. Yu and Saitama hadn't seen King since they were still UA students, and now the pro hero was back. Don't you think this is a little awkward? As he made his way to Yu, King inquired, I mean, I knew this would be a surprise and... Saitama called his name, King. He had a frighteningly serious expression on his face when the blonde pro hero looked down at him. Saitama, he was afraid to include the word, bro, in his name. You left 6 years ago, and never called. Saitama then extended his hand across Yu, causing the pro hero to close his eyes due to the menacing aura he perceived. To his surprise, however, nothing occurred. When he opened his eyes, he noticed that Saitama was shaking his hand. Saitama smirked and said, welcome back, old man. King grinned back and took it. Good to be back, Saitama bro. A fictitious cough cut short the bro moment. When Saitama and King let go, they glanced down in time to see Yu glaring at them both while crossing her arms. As much as this is a fun moment for you both, you seem to be forgetting one thing. She said with firmness. What is it? Inquired Saitama. You gave King a head bump. It's been 6 years, but you just came here after all that time because I was hurt. What if I hadn't been hurt? Would you still be away? King averted his gaze out of guilt. Yu was correct about him. He heard that the hero hunter had injured her, so he came here. He wouldn't have had to confront the two friends he left behind if it weren't for that. Yu turned away from him. Although her attitude somewhat improved, it was still obvious that she wasn't finished with him. Tightening her fingers on the bed's cover, she said, "Look, I appreciate that you still care. But, why did you leave us? When I woke up in the hospital after that incident, you..." The sound of something hitting the ground interrupted the female pro-hero. When she turned back to King, she saw him lying down. King said, "I'm so sorry, Takayama." With sincerity. "Truth is, I was ashamed of what happened back then. The pressure, the guilt, and the shame were just too much. I felt back then that I wasn't worthy to stay by your side. I was the adult at the time, and I failed to protect any of you." Yu's turn to feel guilty now. Because she had experienced the same emotions as King with Saitama, she already understood them. She didn't contact him after being discharged from the hospital because she didn't have the strength to talk to him. She thought she was being hypocritical. Yu looked down at him and said, "Please, stand up, King." I'm sorry." King stared up at her, perplexed. "You're sorry?" She replied, "Yes, I understand how you feel. I'm ashamed to say, but even I cut relations with someone I held dear." King got up and said, "You do?" "Yes, but," she said, pausing before striking King squarely in the stomach. "Don't you ever leave us like that again. Got it?" "Got it." King smirked and voted, "Yes." Yu smiled at him and giggled. "I missed having you around, King." King returned the smile, saying, "Same here, Takayama." Even Saitama was touched by this sentimental emotion. The number 3 pro-hero was reminded of a long-forgotten sense of nostalgia as his smile shaped to the same fix as his friends. He had only felt this kind of friendship with a select few, including All Might, Genos, Fubuki, and possibly Tatsumaki. His face took on a serious expression as he said, "Looks like the old gang is almost back together. Psychos, I just wish you were here as you used to be." Izuku's mother greeted Tatsumaki and Fubuki as they entered his house. She decided to join them as they were about to eat breakfast. Izuku was taken aback by Tatsumaki's courtesy toward her, but it was understandable that even Tatsumaki knew how to behave properly around someone as kind as his mother. "Tatsumaki, thanks for having us." The dining table was crowded. Izuku sat at one end of the table with his mother at the other, and Tatsumaki sat beside Fubuki. One thing that caught Fubuki's attention was the close seating arrangement of Tatsumaki and Izuku. As she ate the delectable food Izuku's mother had prepared, she had to consider whether this was a coincidence. "Yeah, this is really good," Fubuki gladly exclaimed. "Oh, thank you." Izuku's mother made a red face. "It's so good to have company. Thankfully, I prepared so much that I began to wonder what Izuku and I would do with the extra." Tatsumaki said, "You can give us some to take home if you want." "Well, more like when we get a new home." Izuku's mother said, "Oh right. You wanted Izuku to help you find a new apartment." She remembered Tatsumaki's words. The Esper clarified her meaning earlier. "But I don't know. Shouldn't your parents be the ones to decide?" Tatsumaki stopped advancing with her chopsticks. "Fubuki and I live alone." Izuku's mother hadn't anticipated that at all. Although he was aware of it, her son never really brought it up to his mother. Upon reflection, he never had the opportunity to meet the parents of Tatsumaki and Fubuki. She said, "I'm so sorry. It must be hard." Tatsumaki went back to using her chopsticks, saying, "You don't have to apologize. They were, for better words, awful people, anyway. I hardly believe they were my parents." Izuku asked, covering his mouth quickly, "What do you mean?" "That just came out of my mouth. No, it's fine. I mean, I'm sure everyone in our class has at least one parent. Anyone would assume I might have one too, right?" Right." Tatsumaki didn't pursue that and went back to eating. Her silence made it clear that she didn't want to talk about that subject any further. Luckily, Izuku and his mother had no desire to discuss it. They were aware that discussing personal matters with others was awkward, and they assumed that it was best to keep it private at all times. So, Tatsumaki, Izuku's mother chose to shift the topic. "If you're looking for a place to stay, how about you move in with us?" "Guy," Izuku nearly strangled while eating. "Izuku, are you alright?" The boy with the green hair let out a sigh of relief as he pounded his chest. The shock of his mother's offer had caused the food he ate to become lodged in his throat. He replied, "Why yeah, I'm fine." His mother relaxed. Fubuki laughed in the meantime, understanding why he had given that response. Regarding the offer, Tatsumaki politely declined. She added one more thing. Thanks for the offer, but I think we'll be fine on our own. Because of that stupid monster yesterday, those paparazzi have become so annoyingly persistent. It would be bad to drag you guys into this. I guess. Izuku's mom comprehended. After giving it some thought, the woman realized that she was seated at the same table as the girl who had to fight a villain who had planned an invasion of the city. It was vague because of her heart, but she did remember seeing that on the TV. She fainted several times after witnessing the hero hunter endanger her son's school. Izuku's mother said, "But you shouldn't let that bother you so much. You won't be able to realize your future if you spend too much time in the present. That's what I believe anyway. Just know that you can come to my son or me if you need anything." "I see where he gets his good heart from," Tatsumaki said with a smile. "Regards, ma'am." "You're welcome, Tatsumaki." The breakfast soon came to an end, and Izuku's mother escorted Tatsumaki to the restroom, leaving the boy and Fubuki sitting on the couch watching the live news from Tatsumaki's apartment. Big sister was correct. I'm going to miss living there, but it seems like they haven't noticed that we've left, Fubuki said, scowling. Yes, it was a little isolating, but it was just me, Saitama, and my older sister. Saitama was really kind, and nobody would bother us. Yeah, Izuku mumbled glumly. Fubuki turned to him and said, something wrong. Izuku sat up and clasped his hands together, saying, no, well, maybe. I really messed up by bringing up you guys' parents. Sorry. Fubuki waved it off politely, saying, no, number. It's really fine. To be honest, I don't remember anything about my parents. I did bring it up once, but big sister said they don't matter to us. At least now I know they were bad people. Izuku said, I see, and turned away. At that moment, Fubuki produced 2 rectangular pieces of paper. When she showed them to Izuku, she revealed that they were, in fact, tickets. Here. The teenager noticed. Wait, aren't those tickets? They are, but I have the feeling you might need them. Unavoidably, Izuku asked, what do you mean? If you haven't noticed, you're leaking out internal conflict towards my sister. Luckily, big sister doesn't seem to have noticed it. I think it's because she trusts that you're okay. He gestured to the tickets and said, okay, but are you sure I should take that? In response, Fubuki said, I'm very sure. I was going to hand this to big sister so she and I can go to that amusement park. But I think it should be you instead. It'll be our little secret. At the end, the young girl gave a wink. Izuku accepted the tickets with a smile. She answered, thank you. I owe you for this. Fubuki then grinned and said, you shouldn't. If you marry my sister, you'll already repay me. Big brother, get me lots of nieces and nephews to play with. She had those thoughts locked in her mind, of course. Izuku didn't understand her meaning and probably won't. Tatsumaki entered the living room at that precise moment, followed by his mother. Thanks for letting me use your toilet, Midoriya. Let's go so we can meet that landlady your mom mentioned. The landlady? Inquired Izuku. His mother then made the decision to clarify, yes. I remembered there was an apartment quite close to us that's empty. Tatsumaki and her sister can move in. Fubuki exclaimed, really? From her chair. Awesome. I get to have Izuku as my neighbor. However, Izuku was somewhat taken aback by the news. Tatsumaki was a little worried about living close to his friend classmate, even though it was okay that he would have a place to stay. The fact that he was becoming accustomed to speaking to girls was truly a miracle. It was another matter entirely to have one as a neighbor. To cover up his nervousness, Izuku smiled and said, oh, that's great. Then he gave Tatsumaki the tickets while pretending to cough with his free hand. Here. What's this? Something was wrong now. Izuku has never extended an invitation to a girl. He therefore felt anxious and bashful about approaching a girl to ask her out. Tatsumaki simply stared back at him before removing the tickets from his grasp. She read what was written on it and glanced at them. Gate pass to the funniest place in the city, Funimator Park. Sounds like a stupid and childish name to me. That gave Izuku some mental blows. Fubuki and the boy's mother were both concerned. However, Izuku plucked up the courage to reply. He turned his head away and said, actually, it's pretty fun. My mom and I used to go there when I was little, and teenagers still head over there today. So I was wondering if we can go too. Tatsumaki looked back at Izuku after glancing at the ticket. It's obvious that he's working hard to invite me. However, Fubuki and I are searching for lodging. Since we haven't yet met the landlady. It'll be fun, Izuku exclaimed abruptly. The teenager continued with a powerful yet forceful expression on his face. He was facing her this time. He calmed down abruptly and said, there are a lot of cool rides. I even heard that they brought some new ones. Besides, you've been so frustrated with what happened recently. I just want to see you enjoy yourself. Izuku's mother was nearly surprised. She was overcome with joy for her son. Here he was, summoning the bravery to approach a girl. He reminded her somewhat of the romance books and television series she had seen and read. The fact that she was containing her motherly joy was a good thing. Adorable, my boy is maturing into a man. Happily, she thought. When Tatsumaki's cheeks turned red and she turned her head away, her mood shifted. She thought her heart might have skipped a beat. In any case, she looked back at Izuku and feigned a cough with her fist. He's doing this for me, then. She gave a small smile. This guy. Okay, I'll accompany you, Tatsumaki said, glancing at the tickets. It says here that it opens by 9 a.m. We should get going, so we're not in a long line or something. Izuku gave an upbeat, right, and sprinted away. I'll be right back. Tatsumaki watched him go, as did the other two women in the living room. Since it would be improper to wear a long t-shirt and blue shorts to an amusement park, Izuku had to change. In addition, he had to withdraw his funds so that he could pay for the rides. After a minute, Izuku came back wearing more appropriate attire. He was dressed in black pants and a blue jacket with a white shirt underneath. In addition, he wore white shoes and black stripes. Tatsumaki gave a compliment, saying, not bad. Surprised, Izuku said, why you think so? She pushed her hands inside the hoodie's pocket and pulled up her hood to emphasize her statement, yeah, probably better than my look. She was dressed in purple pants, a black skirt, and a green hoodie. I don't know, you look pretty cool. But why the hoodie? She turned away after responding, the paparazzi, that's why. To be honest, she was grateful for the compliment and only unintentionally let her sister know when she flushed. Now come on, we should get going. Izuku went to the door after agreeing. Because he was polite, he opened the door for her. However, Tatsumaki waved her hand at her sister before following her outside. Stay here and don't go out. If there's any trouble, call me and I'll be here with Midoriya. Got it. With a joyful wave, Fubuki said, got it, big sister. Have fun. Before Izuku shut the door, Tatsumaki gave her a nod. Fubuki turned back to Izuku's mother after their footsteps had faded into the distance and were not audible. She remarked, they make a lovely couple, don't they? Izuku's mother was taken aback, but not for the wrong reasons. She was thinking the same thing as Fubuki's question. Funimation Amusement Park had a lot of visitors. Numerous people visited the park's numerous rides, having the time of their lives and having fun however they pleased. For the majority, it served as a kind of relief as well. Even though there were no fatalities from yesterday's monster invasion, many people were shaken. The atmosphere was pleasant for everyone as friends went about having a good time and children pulled their parents to other rides. Tatsumaki was somewhat taken aback by what she was seeing. It brought back memories of her own lost youth to see so many people enjoying themselves. Even after escaping with Child Emperor and Fubuki, she was never able to enjoy herself because psychos had turned her into an experiment. Izuku saw the odd gaze in Tatsumaki's eyes. He was confident and at ease knowing that she was taking in the sights of the different rides. He had to make sure that didn't change. Luckily, he could still recall old rides from his childhood. Izuku gestured toward a particular ride and said, let's go there, Tats. Tats? Inquired Tatsumaki, perplexed. Yeah, I thought it would be bad if people heard your full name. Izuku responded. He gained knowledge from his prior interactions with All Might and Saitama. It impressed the Esper. She smiled at that, then gave him a shoulder pat. Okay, you can call me that whenever you want, Deku. Izuku nodded awkwardly. Right. Tatsumaki's hair was mostly hidden by her hoodie. Izuku understood that because her color and hairstyle were exclusive to her. They can both enjoy their day at the amusement park without attracting any unwanted attention as long as it is kept down. The two of them boarded the Big Twister, a ride. Tatsumaki sat on one of the ride's chairs and fastened his seatbelt after standing in a long line, and Izuku followed suit. The ride's supervisor declared that he was ready to start. Izuku said, I never thought I'd get to be on this. Tatsumaki inquired, you haven't been on this before? Yeah, was his response. I would always pass by it with my mum. There's an age and height requirement to ride, so I never got the chance. Tatsumaki noted, until now. Izuku consented, and they soon heard the ride begin. The ride lifted off the ground and started to pick up speed from the outside. Soon afterward, it began spinning at an extremely high speed. Nearly everyone on the ride started screaming aloud. For some reason, Tatsumaki was the exception. She was perplexed as she observed everyone appearing to be having fun. Why was traveling this quickly so much fun? If she wanted to, she could move more quickly by herself. In the middle of the screaming, Izuku called out to her before she had a chance to think about it further. This is fun, right? Uncertain, she said, I guess. But when the spinning accelerated, she had a change of heart. It startled Izuku, who inadvertently took Tatsumaki's hand. Startled, the Esper turned to face the teenager. He appeared to be unaware. He was enjoying himself now that she was looking at him. It was entertaining to watch, and the Esper even grinned while observing him. Even after spending some time with her, Izuku had never seen him this excited. She was pleased for her friend. She gave him a gentle squeeze while grinning. She thought, perhaps this isn't so bad after all. After a few minutes, the ride ended. Some of its riders felt worse than others, but many of them came out. But because of his vertigo, Izuku had to hold Tatsumaki's arm in order to walk properly and avoid running into people. Izuku said, I'm really sorry, Tats. Tatsumaki acknowledged, it's fine. The ride was fun. It was. She led him to an empty bench and said, yep. Now sit here. I'll go get us something. Izuku accepted the offer, but he stopped her with a hand gesture. He believed that he ought to have brought them something. However, he let out a groan and let go of Tatsumaki. The Esper returned a few seconds later with 2 corn dogs after visiting a food vendor. She gave Izuku a corn dog and said, here. How are you feeling? Then Izuku sighed, all right now. The Esper sat beside him, and he watched. I'll be sure to pay you back, Tats. She bit her corn dog and said, it's fine. We're both enjoying ourselves, right? Right. Izuku was relaxed. They both ate their corn dog, which didn't last long, in silence. After finishing, Tatsumaki got up and turned to face Izuku. So, where to next? She asked. After responding, Izuku led her to the rides. It would be a montage of the two of them riding from one ride to another if this were a show. Izuku took her on a tour of the bumper cars, a horror house, several roller coasters, and other crazy rides. Izuku made them enjoyable for Tatsumaki. It was a lot of fun with Izuku by her side, even though most of them wouldn't be exciting if she was by herself. At moments like these, Tatsumaki was truly relieved to be worry-free. With excitement, Tatsumaki inquired, where to next? After finishing another ride, they went for a walk together. As time went on, Izuku grew accustomed to the wild rides. Speaking of time, neither of them had been able to keep track of it, but that wasn't a major issue. Just as Izuku opened his mouth to respond to Tatsumaki's query, a man called out to them from his shooting booth. Yes, you too. How about you come win a prize for your girlfriend? I have a special prize for couples. He yelled. Gee, girlfriend. See couples. Izuku exclaimed, blushing bravely. Wait, she's not my. When the teenager felt Tatsumaki's arm snatch his own, he stopped talking. He could feel the girl's tiny breast against his chest as the Esper drew nearer. Tatsu. To the man, she yelled, we're coming. Then she faced Izuku once more. Keep it down. You almost called my full name. Anyway, it's fine if we act like we're a couple, right? I mean, it's not like we're actually one, right? Even she was starting to feel ashamed now. Until that moment, she had not given holding Izuku in that manner much thought. Izuku was able to play along despite his nervousness, which was fortunate because it was almost awkward. When Izuku said, why yeah, it should be fine, her blush only got worse. Right. Tatsumaki felt her heart pounding rapidly. Izuku was the closest boy she had ever held. Izuku was the same way, albeit with regard to the other sex. It was both embarrassing and exciting for them to be so close. As they approached the booth, they made an effort to ignore the latter feeling. Izuku was freed by Tatsumaki to seize the fictitious firearm. It looked like a shotgun. The man claimed that in order to win a prize for Tatsumaki, he had to shoot every target in a minute. Izuku was aware, but he missed one of the targets by accident. The man said, "Not good, kid. You've got 40 seconds left. I should mention that any use of quirks to use is prohibited, assuming you have one." In response, Izuku said, "All right." Tatsumaki encouraged him, saying, "Deku, you can succeed. Picture those targets like they're monsters. I know you can do it." Tatsumaki's right. Izuku tightened his hold on the fictitious gun. "I should not dwell on the events that occurred not too long ago. It's for her. For her, I ought to win this prize." That thought was accompanied by a strong sense of resolve. Even before the teenager started shooting at the targets, the man in the booth could sense it. Naturally, Izuku took care to avoid using his quirk at all. He hit every target before the timer went off by using only his typical physical strength. "And you've won," declared the man. He proceeded to take out a plush heart in the shape of a love. The two teenagers were taken aback. They hadn't anticipated such a prize. It made sense, however, that a couple's prize would be something related to love now that Izuku had been given the item. Izuku handed it to her politely, saying, "Here." The two teenagers were attempting to avoid making the situation awkward. Silently, Tatsumaki took it and held it against her chest. The plush toy abruptly said, in a sweet voice, "I love you." Both Tatsumaki and Izuku were taken aback, and their faces flushed as they turned away. Tatsumaki managed to say, Thanks. It's cute." Izuku answered, "I'm glad you like it." When something unexpected occurred, both teenagers were extremely silent. For a moment, the wind grew stronger and blew across them. Naturally, it had no negative effects on them. It did, however, blow back Tatsumaki's hood, exposing her curly green hair. "No way," uttered a female witness. "It's Tatsumaki." Everyone's attention was captured by that exclamation alone. After being brought back to the current issue, Tatsumaki and Izuku observed what transpired. Nearby residents started rushing toward them in the large numbers the Esper had feared. They had to leave. There was no time to waste. With haste, Tatsumaki took Izuku's hand and fled in an unclear direction. "We have to get away from here. Fast." Izuku noted this, but did not try to object. But the more people they passed, the more attention they received because those people could also identify the Esper. The situation for the two teenagers quickly worsened as the small group of people grew. Tatsumaki gestured toward a particular ride and said, "Over there. We can hide in there." The Esper didn't realize it was the love tunnel. As the Esper dragged him away in its direction, Izuku was able to identify it. He tried calling her name, of course, to tell her about the location, but she ignored him. After pushing her way through the crowd, Tatsumaki arrived at an empty heart-shaped boat. She yelled, "Get in," and shoved him into the two. Later, the Esper proceeded to jump in. When she used her peculiarity to get the boat moving, the operator was taken aback. Once the boat entered the tunnel, the pursuing crowd could no longer follow them. Tatsumaki sighed, "Okay, looks like we're safe." "Why yeah," Izuku said uneasily. His response perplexed the Esper, who raised an eyebrow and inquired, "What's up?" "We should be all right now that we have separated from the crowd." "Do you know where this is, Tatsumaki?" "No. What is it?" Izuku never had a chance to say it. She discovered it for herself. Tatsumaki was shocked to see the love-themed designs and characters surrounding them, and the tunnel abruptly lit up with different colors, grabbing her attention. Her face lit up red until she overloaded, and smoke poured out of her head, demonstrating that the entire scene was too much, especially when combined with what had happened before the chase. Tatsumaki! Izuku yelled in surprise. The Esper felt embarrassed, but she quickly recovered and bowed her head, unable to allow this error to overcome her in this way. "I apologize," she said. "I truly ruined this for us both." "What are you saying?" Izuku inquired. "The paparazzi, the fanatics, it's because of me that you can't enjoy yourself." The Esper responded. Izuku whispered, "Tatsumaki," and extended his hand to her, saying, "I really enjoyed spending time with you." "Hey, do you?" Tatsumaki looked in his direction. Izuku put his hand on the Esper's hand and grinned, saying, "Yeah. I came here to see you have fun, but now you're worrying about me." "You are truly remarkable, Tatsumaki." "I'm not," the Esper said, shaking her head. "You don't know what I've been through. I'm really not that amazing." Izuku yelled, "But you are," and inadvertently squeezed Tatsumaki's hand harder. "I don't mean it with your quirk. You're really amazing, Tatsumaki. You're smart, caring and thoughtful to others." When you fought psychos, you were doing it because you wanted to keep everyone safe. You always take the burden on yourself, even when you shouldn't. He saw all of that. Tatsumaki was taken aback. He stopped and pressed his face against hers, saying, "That's why, I want you to place some of your burdens on me. We're in this together." Tatsumaki felt her heart skip a beat. Perhaps Izuku's face and the physical contact, or perhaps his words, were the reason. In any event, she had a fresh perspective on Izuku that she had never had before. She whispered, "Midoriya, your hand." Before he looked down and realized what she meant, Izuku was perplexed. He apologized and quickly withdrew. "Sorry, Tatsumaki, The Esper reached out and grabbed her hand, cutting him. He wasn't as shocked by her action as he was by her face. Tatsumaki had a red face, but not in a bad way. She had such an innocent, modest, and adorable appearance. Tatsumaki remarked, I don't hate it anymore." Izuku swallowed a drop of saliva. It appeared as though the entire situation between them had reached a level he never would have anticipated. Was it something he detested? No. Was he uneasy? He did at first. But he was starting to see Tatsumaki differently as the lovely lights and comforting music took over. Their boat faltered and they both fell before either of them could get the words out. The two teenagers didn't realize they had shifted positions for a few seconds. Tatsumaki lay on the floor of the boat. Izuku was on top of her at the same moment. They were so near to one another that they could sense each other's heartbeats. I'm sorry." Izuku pushed himself away in a hurry. If he hadn't looked down at the Esper, he would have completely gotten off her. She didn't look like herself at all. Izuku was captivated by her face and posture, which were so innocent and vulnerable, even though some of her hair was on the floor. "Tatsumaki." She softly called his name, Izuku. This feeling between them was incomprehensible to all of them. They had never really experienced anything like it before. In their early years, Izuku and Tatsumaki had little to no interaction with people of the other sex. And now that they were becoming teenagers, they were feeling something they couldn't describe and hadn't even realized before. If not for one thing, the moment might have continued for a long time. The boat trembled once more violently this time. When they heard screaming from other couples in front of them, Tatsumaki and Izuku were startled out of their reverie. One woman yelled, "Something's under the boat." Another woman cried out, It's a monster." Suddenly, the boat that Tatsumaki and Izuku were on shot into the air. If the Esper hadn't used her quirk to levitate herself and Izuku to the ground, they would have struck the ceiling. "What was that?" Izuku inquired. A gigantic red centipede leaping out of the water was his response. Izuku immediately recognized the monster. "Junior Centipede. You know this monster?" inquired Tatsumaki. Izuku clarified, "Yeah, but it's supposed to be dead. The pro hero, Metal Bat, encountered it in his hometown and beat it with one swing of his bat. It was the same with its brother Senior Centipede when the pro hero faced Garo. But how is it alive?" The Junior Centipede landed on the same sidewalks as them and said, "That's none of your concern, human. I am here to support Tatsumaki. I heard what you did. 2 years ago, you injured Elder Centipede, the biggest monster we've ever encountered. I want to get even with him." Tatsumaki's expression changed to one of seriousness, saying, "Now that I'm looking at you more closely, you almost look like that stupid bug I fought. You engaged in combat with Elder Centipede." Izuku was taken aback. The fact that Tatsumaki had encountered Elder Centipede was shocking because it was not like other monsters. Its mere presence in a city was enough to portend disaster. "Yes, we were in middle school at the time. The field trip to that island most likely did not include you. Anyway." Tatsumaki then raised her hand at the monster, using her quirk, saying, "I'll end this quick." "Oh, don't think it'd be so easy." An enormous Rafflesia flower with somewhat rounder features appeared as another monster, emerging from the earth behind Junior Centipede and releasing an odd green gas from its top. "Have your nose covered. That monster is Raffleized," Izuku yelled, covering half of his face with his jacket. "He is a monster of demon level. You are quite knowledgeable about these creatures," Tatsumaki said while using the neckline of her hoodie to cover her nose. She would have killed then anyway. But then she noticed the gas going deeper to the tunnel. "Shit, yes, exactly. Couples are present. Leave. You'll be able to get them out of here faster," Izuku yelled. "I will face these monsters head on." "Are you serious?" "Believe me, just as I rely on you, Tatsumaki, I want you to rely on me." She didn't want him hurt, but she accepted his words just in time. and the Esper's thoughts returned to what Izuku had said on the boat. Looking back, she realized that Izuku was always trying to be there for her. Stop talking. Simply pass away. Junior Centipede leapt at them out of nowhere. Tatsumaki and Izuku reacted and moved aside, but the Esper turned back and yelled before flying past the two monsters and Izuku landing at the opposite end of the tunnel. You're all right, Midoriya. I have faith in you. Izuku turned to Junior Centipede and thought, right. I won't let you down, Tatsumaki. Child, I'll make sure you regret it. I'll also kill Tatsumaki after I'm done with you. After saying that, Junior Centipede leapt directly at Izuku. In response, Izuku leapt over the monster. He wasn't completely out of the monster's grasp, though, so it struck him with its back until he hit the ceiling. The creature then turned around and struck Izuku's body with its face. Although the teenager was hurt, it didn't stop him from fighting. He landed in the same spot as before and was ready to move when all of a sudden he discovered that his body was immobile. I can't move, he pondered, and then it dawned on him. Junior Centipede's attack had taken him by surprise, and he had neglected to cover his nose. The entire cave was covered with Raffleisden's gas. Junior Centipede then proceeded to go around Izuku and slam his body against the teenager after its hypnotic effect overcame him. Do you still feel like a hero? The monster continued to slam Izuku while mocking it. It ended when the teenager was slammed so hard that he flew into the water. Izuku's body was no longer under the hypnotic influence, but it was still in danger. In order to kill him, Junior Centipede dove and widened its mandibles. I'll make sure this water is coated in your blood. As if. Izuku clenched his fist after giving it some serious thought. The hypnotic gas effect is no longer present. It implies, smash, Hawaii. Izuku struck Junior Centipede in the face with his fist. His entire body was hurled out of the water in a split second, strewn about before it struck the water's surface and the ground. Raffleisden was astonished by the loss and even frightened when Izuku leapt out of the water and came directly at him. I now remember that punch. The monster pondered. Psychos forewarned about a boy who had been taught by Caped Baldy in All Might. Does that imply that Tatsumaki was present? And Izuku yelled, Detriot. Raffleisden screamed, I won't die here, and hurled his vines. There was nothing to be done. Izuku struck the monster with a strong wing slash after slamming his palms together. Clap. He added that Raffleisden's vines had been reduced to nothing. Additionally, the clap caused portions of the tunnel to collapse. Izuku quickly sprinted out of the debris path before stopping when it was finished. I did it. Izuku joyfully cried. It wasn't often that a child with a quirk defeated a monster that was both tiger and demon level nearly simultaneously. However, he was too hasty to announce his triumph. He saw the water beside him trembling and quickly discovered why. The tunnel of love exploded in the distance, sending dust skyward. Heroes stationed there were evacuating the local population. Izuku, meanwhile, was launched through the air and hit a booth with a crash. What precisely was that? He pondered. When the monster dove for Izuku, it showed itself. With the exception of its dark blue armor, it was a blue version of Junior Centipede. It also had two sets of eyes and noses, and its face was covered in layers of armor. Senior Centipede is alive too. He never received a proper answer from the monster. It let out a loud cry and dove directly at him. Thankfully, Izuku managed to leap out of the and get to his feet. However, he was hurled straight up into the air after feeling the ground rumble beneath him. He was within reach of Senior Centipede, who then used his mandibles and antennae to slit him. With every slash, Izuku let out a cry of agony. In a matter of seconds, his jacket was torn, and the remaining blows were directed at his body and other clothing. Then, Senior Centipede struck Izuku out of reach. It sent the teenager hurtling toward a Ferris wheel. Had he not hurriedly grabbed one of the poles and clung to it, he would have struck it. As he got closer to the Ferris wheel, Senior Centipede remarked, Persistent, I hate persistent. I too have someone I wish to kill as vengeance. I heard he's in this park. I'll kill you here and get him. The monster started to circle the Ferris wheel after that. As it produced a cloud of dust, it was intended to frighten Izuku by displaying its breadth and general size. For the old Izuku, it would have worked, but not for the one that is holding on to the Ferris wheel. The carts on the Ferris wheel appear to be empty. Good, he said, returning his attention to Senior Centipede. The monster guidebook states that the Senior Centipede's robust carapace can withstand nearly any physical attack, including missiles. I must give this punch my all if I'm going to end it here. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled. His eyes flashed green as he opened them, and then he saw green, red lines appear all over his body. He seemed indifferent to the green electricity that started to shoot haphazardly from his body. He leapt from the pole and let himself fall. When he saw him approaching, Senior Centipede charged tactics. Instead of continuing to circle the ride, it leapt into the air, its jaws poised to sever Izuku's head. As that was happening, Tatsumaki was traveling to the battleground. Until she could get there, she could only hope that Izuku was okay. As for the heroes, Metal Bat swept past them all in a matter of seconds as some of them made their way there. Damn it, just one the day I was discharged from the hospital, that monster had to ruin my day with my little sister. I'll make sure that shit is nothing but a bloody pulp this time. He screamed. The gap between him and Senior Centipede was narrowing back at Izuku. Before he gripped his fist, Full Cowl's power surged through his body. I'll demonstrate to Tatsumaki my dependability. After saying that, he cried aloud. One for all. 1,000,000%. California. SMASSSHHH. Senior Centipede's pincers were closing in on his body when his fist struck his face. Izuku struck Senior's upper body with such force that it turned into bloody green fragments, and the effect was felt strongly. Senior Centipede's body was so severely damaged by Izuku's punch that only pieces of it and blood were sent flying, like a blast from the sky. Additionally, it shook the entire amusement park in a matter of seconds, and both the evacuating residents and the professional heroes felt it. The shockwave and dust hit Tatsumaki just as she was ready to hit the ground. She immediately protected herself by erecting a psychic shield. That wasn't the case for Metal Bat, though, who instantly defended himself and put his hand over his face. He yelled, "What the hell?" This unexpected shockwave did not only surprise and astonish Metal Bat. Both inside and outside, people were perplexed by what had happened. As soon as the dust cloud started to lift, Tatsumaki took off running. She exclaimed, "Midoriya, Midoriya, where are you?" out loud. There was a massive crater where Senior Centipede used to be. A specific person descended from the sky as the Ferris wheel at that precise spot crashed down. With Full Cowl's power still pulsing through him, Izuku was making his way downward. Tatsumaki initially considered slowing him down with her quirk, but it was ineffective. The ground was split in two by Izuku's stomp. When more dust hit her, Tatsumaki staggered and covered her face. It passed away earlier than the last one, and she was startled to see who she was seeing when she peeked through her arms. Izuku had a heroic stance. His face appeared serious as Full Cowl's electricity danced around him as he straightened back up. "Tatsumaki," he addressed her gravely. "I did it." Tatsumaki lowered her arms to observe what she was witnessing. There was something new and refreshing about him, aside from the obvious new display of power. Tatsumaki sensed it, but she was unable to articulate it at the moment. "So, this is one for all. This is Izuku's real power." Izuku dropped to his knee, breaking Tatsumaki's stare. He moaned as he held his arm before Full Cowling cut off. Tatsumaki hurried to Izuku and leapt into the crater. She yelled, "Midoriya, are you okay?" "Yeah," Izuku replied, flinching. "Looks like I sprained my arm. I guess you think I can't handle myself in a fight now." "You idiot." She struck the teenager on the head before he could react. "You did great. Thank you, Midoriya." Izuku was surprised, but he quickly got over it and grinned. However, the two teenagers heard a voice before he could respond. "Oi, you kids all right?" Metal Bat was there, but he was sand-covered. Grabbing his bat by the shoulder, he leapt to the crater. "Are you the one that did this?" "Pretty cool, kid," he laughed. "According to Tatsumaki, I remember you." Metal Bat retorted, "And I remember you, but you don't have time for that." And turned away. He turned his head to smile coolly at them and said, "Other pro heroes are about to show up. You kids might get in trouble if they see you here. But don't worry, I'll cover for you." Then Izuku nodded and said, Thank you." Tatsumaki triggered her quirk and nodded as well. Before taking off without anyone else noticing, she made sure to cover Izuku with him. The fact that they were gone pleased Metal Bat. All he had to do now was take care of the paperwork involved in reporting this incident. Psycho said, somewhat disappointed, "So, they lost." Her throne chair, which was elevated above the floor, was where she was sitting. She kept staring at a medium-sized ball in her hand that displayed the entire amusement park, but no one knew where she was. "What do you think, Elder Centipede? And I wasted such resources to bring those two back to life." At least I know my research on life and death is almost complete. She saw the dragon-level monster move its head above her, its face devoid of any anger or concern for his fellows, and the rest of its body roaming around, covering every inch of Psychos' throne room and beyond. Walking along the sidewalks, Tatsumaki and Izuku could see some police cars and ambulances heading to the amusement park, which was a few miles behind them. It had been a little rough, but now they were both comfortable. Izuku rubbed his right arm and said, "Thanks for fixing my arm. I didn't think you could heal it." Before leaving the amusement park completely, they had returned to retrieve Tatsumaki's plush toy and made a stop at a nearby store to bring some clothes, which the staff kindly gave Izuku for a reasonable price. It also helped that they were aware of the incident that had occurred. There were no scratches on Izuku's body, and Tatsumaki had her hood up to conceal her hair, so to everyone else, they were just two typical teenagers heading out. "Yes," Tatsumaki told Izuku, "anyway, you did pretty well. It's not really like that recovery old hag though. Midoriya, you're getting stronger." "Am I?" Izuku paused and raised his fist to see. Thinking back at what happened, he smiled and said, "Yeah, I am. Hearing this will make All Might happy. I have no doubt that he will. I'm going to be counting on you more from now on, Deku," she said, pausing and turning to face Izuku. The teenage boy was perplexed by her behavior until he noticed the joyous smile on her face. "I hope it's okay with you." "No, not at all." Izuku returned the smile. Nothing extraordinary happened, and Izuku and Tatsumaki walked side by side, discussing themselves as Izuku took her to the landlady's apartment. They could have such moments if the landlady let the Esper stay in one of her apartments, but for the most part, they talked about how much fun they had before the monsters attacked. Izuku stopped at the front of the house and said, "Well, that's the place." Tatsumaki turned back to Izuku after walking to the front lawn while they were in the suburban area and said, "Thanks, I'll handle it from here." "Tatsumaki, are you certain?" "She kind of knows me," he said, "so I could talk to her." Izuku was always trying to help her, even with something as simple as meeting someone, but Tatsumaki couldn't help but laugh. "No, you've done enough, Midoriya," she replied, shaking her head. "Return home and relax. Depending on how the negotiations proceed, I should be there in about an hour." "All right," he turned back after saying, "See you later, Tatsumaki." She stopped him and said, "Oh," and Izuku, the teenager turned sideways to face her, but was taken aback when she rushed to embrace him. "Thank you for being my friend," she said. In an attempt to conceal the flush on her cheeks, the Esper stepped back and let go of Izuku, whose face flushed as his mind was shocked by the unexpected physical contact. "Well, don't get used to it. I mean, the hug. I just wanted to express my appreciation." She then dashed to the front door and entered the house. Izuku just stared at the door. Talking to a real girl was one thing, but getting an embrace from her was quite another. The boy's mind was at a loss for words, so he recovered a bit and muttered, "See you, Tatsumaki." Then he turned and started walking home, a long walk, but only because his mind was overanalyzing, thinking about Tatsumaki, and as he reflected on their day together, he couldn't help but pass into a trance and mutter exactly what his mind was thinking. When he finally arrived home, he managed to break out of his reverie and sigh at the door. Unable to comprehend these emotions, he chose to put it away for the time being and go to his room. Fubuki and his mother greeted him, but he gave them a noncommittal response before leaving for his room. "What was the purpose of that? He doesn't look hurt, which is good, but," inquired Izuku's mother. Fubuki laughed. "Looks like something pretty good happened to him and big sister." As Izuku's mother remained in the dark, her son arrived at his room, shut the door, sighed, and slammed his back against the door. "I would really like some answers, even though I know I haven't been touched by a girl like that." "Are you looking for answers? So you haven't seen anything?" inquired a different voice. Izuku was startled and looked up, realizing that someone had clearly read his mind. He was shocked to see who it was, Psychos, but at a very young age. She appeared much more innocent than her adult self. "Help me, Midoriya Izuku, you're my only hope," she replied. Almost 7 years ago, Yu's head ached as a teenager. With a feeble groan, she opened her eyes feebly to look around. She was surprised to find herself hanging upside down in an unidentified place. She looked around and said, "What? Where am I?" She discovered that she was chained when she attempted to move her arms. A man's voice said, "Don't bother struggling. You're my captive until Saitama comes here." Yu looked to an air walkway beside her and recognized that voice. She became enraged when she saw the teenage boy with the long black hair, purple scarf, and black spandex that almost gave him a girlish appearance. "Speed-o sound Sonic," she exclaimed, referring to him. "What the hell did you do to me? Where is this? You better explain yourself or else all." When a black substance was thrown into Yu's mouth, her lips immediately closed, silencing her. Sonic didn't care that she muttered in rage, but it wasn't loud enough for him to hear. She had an irritated expression on her face while he sat on a railing. "This is why I don't like getting involved with girls. All you girls ever do is talk. It's really annoying." Yu yelled, "Hey, over the muck." She was offended, but Sonic didn't care. "By the way, don't try to grow big unless you want to take a nice bath in acid." Before glancing down to see what he meant, Yu arched an eyebrow. She was shocked to discover that she was suspended above an open tank that was brimming with unidentified chemicals. The ninja assassin appeared to sneer at her response. Everything was proceeding as planned. "This is an abandoned warehouse I found. Now all I have to do is wait for Saitama and that purple-haired girl to arrive." Sonic smiled as there was a loud boom at that precise moment. A dust cloud appeared in the direction it was coming from, and as he and Yu looked in that direction, adolescent psychos flew out of it, followed by adolescent Saitama. They were both dressed up as heroes, just like Yu. Sonic said, "Right on time." He then got to his feet and spread his arms. "Saitama, we meet again, but for the last time. Just know that when this is over, only I will be walking out of this place alive." Saitama moaned in mild annoyance. "Oh, it's you again. You're, Jack-o'-lantern panic, right?" Sonic cried out in rage, "It's Speed-o sound Sonic." His legs trembled as he paused and said, "How can you forget your arch-nemesis? You punched me." His thoughts returned to the instant he unintentionally landed on Saitama's raised fist while his legs were spread wide. Psychos laughed and snorted. "Wait, you're still mad about that? PFF'd. Ha 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 ha." Sonic yelled, "Don't laugh." Before a smile appeared on his face, he held up some sort of remote control and pushed a red button. "Since you think that's funny, here's my reason to laugh." Yu was restrained by a chain that started to descend toward the acid tank. The scene startled Psychos and Saitama, and the Esper flew in her direction in response. She yelled, "Yu, hold on, I'll save you." Sonic exclaimed, "Not so fast," and produced a tiny iron rod. The ninja assassin hurled the rod at a small tank that the Esper would pass as Psychos was moving directly toward Yu. Unbeknownst to her, it was tied with several black balls that, when struck by the iron, exploded as she passed it. Before the fire struck her, she could hardly form a shield. But she was knocked to the ground by the blunt from the explosion. With a moan, she attempted to stand up in time to notice that the fire was now spreading around her. However, Sonic seemed unconcerned. With his blade out for the kill, he leapt directly at her. Saitama intervened and took hold of Sonic's arm before Psychos could react. In response, the ninja assassin kicked Saitama in the face before standing up a short distance from Psychos. After being knocked to the ground, Saitama got back up and turned to face Psychos. "You alright? Go save Takayama, I've got this guy." Sonic rushed toward him out of nowhere. "Worry about yourself." Wind blade kick. A quick front kick sent the ninja assassin directly at Saitama. Had he not jumped out of the way in time, Saitama would have been struck by his foot. However, when Sonic materialized in front of him while they were both in the air, even that opportunity was lost. Sonic yelled, "Exploding shuriken," and hurled 5 shurikens at the teenager. The attacks struck Saitama, sending him flying. The scene appeared to shock Psychos, but Sonic laughed triumphantly. "It was Saitama," she exclaimed. She considered helping him, but then she recalled what he had told her. Until she rescued Yu, she could only hope he would stay. So she swooped as quickly as she could to Yu. Sonic fell in front of a pile of debris while she was on the scene. Saitama had been knocked to the spot, but now that his body appeared to be unconscious, Sonic approached him with a sense he had long desired. It was the sensation of sweet triumph. "I haven't even gotten to use the new technique I developed just to beat up. Don't think the fire will finish you before I can," Sonic replied. Saitama sat up and shifted. He said, turning to face the advancing Sonic, "If you wanted to fight me so bad, you should have just told me. You didn't need to kidnap Takayama just to get my attention." "Perhaps, but she's more of a pest than that purple-haired one. Do I look like an ant to be stepped on?" Saitama wasn't sure how he would react to that. You had, in fact, attempted to step on Sonic once when they were facing him. Sonic grinned maniacally and went on. Fortunately, that doesn't matter. I can kill her anytime I want thanks to the training I've acquired from my village. Now, prepare for your own death, Saitama. This is a technique I formed just to kill you. Saitama, however, was shocked by the ninja assassin's subsequent actions. Sonic started seeing afterimages of himself, his body appearing hazy because he was traveling at the speed of sound. This is the technique that will finish you off, Saitama. I call this Four Shadows Burial. Scattered flash slash. Saitama scanned his surroundings for indications of an impending assault. However, Sonic hit him, causing multiple cuts on the teen's body with his blades. Saitama attempted to strike them from all sides, but it was ineffective. He couldn't match Sonic's speed. As he continued to strike him from all sides, he exclaimed, "Ha ha 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 ha. How does it feel to be powerless against my technique, Saitama? Now to bring about your end. Goodbye, Saitama." The teenager closed his eyes as if he had come to terms with his fate. Sonic had the same thought and went for the kill when he was taken aback. Saitama moved aside and avoided Sonic's blade swing, which was intended to kill him directly, at a speed that might have been faster than Sonic's. Nani? Sonic stammered, his eyes wide with surprise. He turned to face Saitama again and saw the teenager's eyes pop open before his fist approached him. Sonic became frightened at once. Before Saitama's punch could reach him, he jumped out of the way due to instinct. What on earth was that? How could he see right through my strategy? Furthermore, he managed to avoid it. Sonic snarled in rage as he considered this. How did you dodge my technique? I was certain that I perfected it. Saitama's expression softened to one of casualness. Oh, that's easy. I just copied what I saw from an anime I watched. Sonic appeared to have lost his soul. He gave Saitama a blank look and remained silent until a snarl appeared on his face. An anime. You saw through my technique because of some stupid anime. It's not stupid. It's pretty cool if you. Shut it. I don't care. Sonic shot back, pushing his arm aggressively out of the way. You've made a fool out of me for the last time, Saitama. I won't be surprised again. That I swear. You disagreed. Before Sonic knew it, he was knocked unconscious by the girl's enormous hand slamming down on him. Then she straightened up and took his body in her hand. With rhetoric, she questioned, "You were saying?" When the fire started to peak, things changed. Before pieces of ceiling debris started to fall, there were a few explosions. Psycho screamed as he flew to Yu's head. The whole place is coming down. We have to get going. With a cough, Yu exclaimed, "You're right." She extended her hand to Saitama after turning her head in his direction. Come on. Saitama jumped to her open palm after nodding. When he landed there, the giant girl sprinted as quickly as she could through the walls of the warehouse. Psychos, meanwhile, was right behind her, following her. Soon after, they emerged from the warehouse in time to witness its fiery explosion. Yu was launched into the air by the explosion's force alone. Before they hit the snowy ground, every teen let out a scream, and Yu quickly returned to normal. The next time they got up, it was to see the ashes of the warehouse crumble to the floor. Dryly, Saitama remarked, "Looks like we made it out." Yu turned away after giving him a raised eyebrow. "You think?" she asked. She let out a sigh. "I hate that guy. I wasn't looking forward to my winter vacation as an abductee." "Yeah," Psycho said, surveying the area. "Wait a minute, where is Sonic?" After their eyes widened, Saitama and Yu turned to search for the ninja assassin. He was nowhere to be seen. However, when he spoke, there was an echo in his voice. "You've won this battle, Saitama. But mark my word, this isn't over. I will return no matter how long it will takes me to." Psycho's eyes went completely green. Her announcement was, "I've found him." Then she broke a branch off a nearby tree by reaching out with her arm. Sonic screamed and immediately struck the snowy ground. He struggled to move when he attempted to stand up because he was trapped in Psychos' psychic bind. With her arms folded across her chest, Yu grinned and said, "And now, you're going to jail." Sonic let out a snarl of rage. Current day. In the present, Sonic was snarling and carrying a tray of prison food as he marched to a solitary table. The ninja assassin, wearing his old uniform, was thinking back to the day he was imprisoned years before. Contrary to what one might assume, the prison was not like any other. Situated on an island near the Japanese mainland, it was a high-level prison designed specifically to house powerful quirk users. Not surprisingly, Sonic had no quirk. Why else would a prison for eccentric criminals be there? Really, it was easy. Not only in Japan but all over the world, Sonic was regarded as a serious threat. He has killed human rights activists, politicians, and undercover agents. Only the individuals listed had their bodies found by authorities. Despite being young at the time, Sonic killed a lot of people. The international community put pressure on the Japanese government to have him imprisoned at their most secure prison after he was arrested. For reasons that were clear to many, he was even tried as an adult. Despite his lack of a peculiarity, he was a dangerous person who should not be allowed to run amok. As Sonic sat at his table, he thought, it's all her damn fault. If it weren't for her dreadful eccentricity, I wouldn't even be here. I've made numerous attempts to get away, but they've all failed miserably. The fact that Puri Puri Prisoner, a pro-hero, is imprisoned here doesn't help either. His mind flashed to the aforementioned pro-hero. Sonic looked down at his prison food and shuddered. It was fortunate for me that he had no interest in teenage boys. But I can't avoid him indefinitely. Even if it means losing my life, I must find a way to escape. No, not until Saitama is dead. I believe I can make that happen. With a gasp, Sonic glanced around. There was no indication that anyone near him was speaking. All of the inmates were alone, either eating or conversing with their groups. Puri Puri Prisoner was seated at a table far away, surrounded by his boys, who, judging by their expressions, clearly did not want to be close to him. Sonic could see this. When Puri Puri Prisoner winked at him, he shuddered and turned away. But then he was surprised to see a woman sitting right across from him wearing a lab coat. He quickly recognized her square-framed glasses and purple hair. "You," growled Sonic. "I remember you. You're one of Saitama's girls that keep following him around." "Ah yes, I see that you have been in the dark. I guess even in prison, the news don't get in here. The Japanese government have really outdone themselves." Sonic gets to his feet right away. He really wanted to attack her. However, he was compelled to return to his seat after feeling her psychic bind him. Now, Sonic, we don't need to be adversaries like those times. I have something that would interest you. Freedom. According to Sonic, you're joking. A pro-hero like you wants to help me. You must think of me as a fool. Tell me why the guards would even allow you here. It's suicidal for someone with a hero status to step here amongst these villains. Psychos laughed. Her reply irritated Sonic, but she went on, "You mistake me for a hero. Oh, Sonic, so much you have missed while you were here. I am no longer the girl you last met those years back, nor do I have any ties with Saitama. My ambition is to rid the world of the filth that is humans." Sonic burst out laughing. Psychos and everyone else in the prison appeared unfazed by it. The ninja assassin halted and gave her a fierce look. "You want to kill humans? I always knew heroes sprouted nonsense, but this is the funniest thing I've heard ever since I was thrown here. Isn't it you that once gave me some dumb speech at heroism that one time I tried to kill Saitama?" Psychos calmly answered, "Yes, that's right. But I was just being naive and a fool. You don't seem to believe me, so you'll just have to confirm things once you step out of this prison. There's a boat that's waiting at North. All you have to do is walk right out of here and get it. HMPH, I don't know if you've become brain dead, but I won't make it through. These ankle monitors they placed on people like me doesn't just monitor my movement, it increases the gravity on my feet. I can't even run as fast as I can even if I want to. Then let's fix that." Sonic's ankle monitors dropped to the floor. Startled, Sonic even checked his surroundings for any indication of guards rushing in his direction. "How did you? I've made our presence in the minds of the guards, prisoners, and that pro-hero unnoticeable. Even if you walk out here, they won't even acknowledge your escape. I've also taken the chance to place your suit and weapons in the boat, so you can get back to work." Sonic grew wary. "And what's in this for you? Even if you've changed, there's something you're after, right?" Psychos remarked nonchalantly, "You're not as dumb as you look." Sonic was offended by the insult, but she gave an explanation. "I want Saitama dead. He's one of the major threats to my ultimate goal. If you haven't heard, he's the number 3 pro-hero in the world. HMPH, like I care about dumb ranks." Sonic got to his feet and started to leave. But before he left Psychos completely, he stopped and spoke to her without turning around. "Just so we're clear, I don't owe you anything," he replied. I never imagined such. After all, we both want Saitama dead." She laughed. Sonic gave a small sigh and turned to leave. He soon discovered that Psychos was correct regarding the security situation at the prison. Nobody really listened to him. In response, the security locks opened their doors. Even the guards on duty at the lookout points ignored him when he stepped outside. He was free for the first time in a long time. He stopped, spread his arms back, and inhaled deeply of the night air. It was wonderful to return. He smiled maniacally. "I'm coming for you soon, Saitama." He then proceeded to the boat that was waiting for him and completely left the island. He had no idea that two monsters were observing him from one of the lookout points. The floor was covered in a trail of blood. At the lookout point, a dead guard who had been posted there was lying. Hellfire Flame and Gale Wind had worked quickly on him. They were now observing Sonic's speedboat departure from the island. Hellfire Flame remarked, "Was it wise to release him? She didn't offer him a monster cell to join us." "Yes, but perhaps that's for the best. Sonic is nothing but a tool that we can use, am I right, Psychos?" Psychos flashed up behind them, grinning mischievously. "I see I'm not the only one who thinks such." With the same gesture toward his comrade, Hellfire Flame turned to face her. He asked, his arms folded across his chest, "So he really is a pawn? I thought it was odd when you mentioned that you wanted him to kill the Caped Baldy. If that fool could kill Caped Baldy, I would have had you two or even Elder Centipede do it for me. I might have even done it myself." Psychos continued by clarifying, "But none of us, not even our dear Monster King, is anywhere strong enough to beat him. According to Gale Wind, that's not assuring. Then why set him free? We need a distraction. With the Hero Society now alert about the Monster Association, we'll need a set of distractions to divert or divide their attention. Sonic is just a part of it." Hellfire Flame inquired, "And the Caped Baldy? Even if All Might will dealt with as you've foreseen, that pro-hero is still a threat on his own." "That is true, hence the reason we have to stall as much as we can so that he will give us the upper hand we need to be rid of Caped Baldy." "He?" inquired Hellfire Flame and Gale Wind. "Oh, did I not tell you? We'll be getting a visitor in a few months. The dominator of the universe, the one who will give us the greatest advantage, Boros. A future point that is unspecific." Explosions were occurring, and black smoke was rising into the sky. The city was situated above an alien spaceship that formerly housed aliens who were currently fighting alongside heroes and the military, and the skies were as black as ash. A sizable portion of the city appeared to be in ruins, with much more to follow. Aliens have invaded Musutafu. But Boros didn't really care about the mayhem. He was looking for someone when all of a sudden he felt the air change, and he quickly swung his hand at an approaching attack. He had a big orange energy ball, but the alien boss swung it away with a single motion. "These humans sure are relentless, not that it matters much," Boros stated. At that moment, Mount Lady, in her enormous form, dashed through the damaged building, causing it to collapse. When she saw Boros, she snarled and swung her fist down at him, demonstrating no self-control. To catch her fist, the alien pirate captain hardly had to extend his hand back. Despite his diminutive size, he was more than capable of repelling Mount Lady. Mount Lady screamed, "We won't let you get anywhere near, Saitama." Then she swung it at him, substituting her leg for her fist. Boros turned to face her completely, unfazed. He could see her attack coming, but he was not really in danger. He paused and held up his arm to her, saying, "So you do know him. However, I have no dealing with you, human." After saying that, he waved his finger, which unexpectedly sent Mount Lady into a strong wind. Before being launched 20 feet into the air, the pro-hero was struck in the stomach with such force that she spat blood. Suddenly, Boros was standing over her, his arms folded. Upon making eye contact, the alien inhaled deeply and unleashed a strong wind against Mount Lady, causing her to scream as she crashed into a few buildings. Before everything was covered by a cloud of dust, there was a loud impact. Boros landed in front of the ruin and blew out the dust cloud with his right hand. At that moment, he noticed Mount Lady lying among the rubble of what had once been buildings, unconscious and severely battered. "Perhaps, if I take you as a captive, it would be enough to bring him to me. I'm not as impatient as I was before." "You will do no such thing." A few meters away from him, a ray of orange light struck the earth at that precise moment. Boros observed it and waited for it to subside so he could determine its origin. After arriving on the scene, Genos scowled and held out his right hand. I will make certain that you're eliminated, Boros. He replied. Boros's lips then formed a tiny smile as he said, so you're the one who shot that weak attack earlier. I'm assuming you know Saitama. I guess I can do with an appetizer before the main dish. Try not to disappoint me, Cyborg. I'll be taking you as a captive too, so take a bit of comfort with that. We'll just have to see about that, Dominator of the Universe. Psychos grinned broadly in the present and then pushed her glasses back in a manner reminiscent of anime genius. Yes, I can see the ending. We need not worry about our victory. It's very much certain, once I make my move. Gale Wind and Hellfire Flame looked at one another, unsure of what to make of it. They were going to interpret it as good news, though. Izuku's thoughts had been racing with a lot of things on the way home. The majority of them were related to his excursion with Tatsumaki and the peculiar sensation he was having. Naturally, if he was going to be honest with himself, he would say that there was nothing wrong with it. He ought to have gone to his bed and thought about it until he was asleep. Before he met the one person who should never be in his room, that was part of the plan. It was only a few minutes later that it occurred. Fubuki was sitting next to Izuku at a long couch. When someone unexpectedly showed up at his house without warning, he couldn't really let his guard down. Given what she had done recently, he already questioned whether she should be invited. Psycho's appearance was significantly different from what Izuku had witnessed firsthand. He had seen her face on the news, but he had never seen her in her human form before she abruptly changed into a monster. For obvious reasons, she was essentially the talk of the nation. Monsters were known to rarely form alliances, and when they did, it was always related to specific characteristics, such as their level of threat or desire to cause havoc. However, when Psychos ordered monsters of all levels, from the lowest to the dragon, to attack the city, all consideration and analysis of their behavior was thrown to the wind. Izuku had every reason to exercise caution around her, of course. Even Izuku found it difficult to believe her when she claimed she didn't mean any harm. Since he knew he couldn't fight her without getting his mother and Fubuki into trouble, he simply complied. What did his mother think of the bad guy in their house, by the way? To put it mildly, she was afraid. She had witnessed the entire Psychos incident both inside and outside of Ua, just like the majority of the city's residents. She found it difficult to believe the Esper's assurance that she meant no harm. She may also have a peculiarity, but she was aware that she could not defend herself, much less her son and Fubuki. What she could do, she did. Trying not to show her fear, she offered to make her some tea. She even entertained the idea of spending her time by herself in the kitchen. Nevertheless, she behaved normally despite her fear for her son. She merely hoped that her son and Fubuki wouldn't be killed in the process of whatever the Esper desired. Young Psychos accepted the cup of tea and said, "Thank you." She already knew how she was perceived in the room. She could feel Izuku's mother sitting near the couch's armrest as she sipped her tea, but she was positioned so that Fubuki and Izuku couldn't get any closer to the Esper. It was admirable and pleasant to her. "You remind me of my mother. Always thinking about your child's safety." "I like that," she replied. She dropped the teacup on the coffee table, and to her surprise, it sounded sadder than anything threatening. Izuku's mother swallowed her saliva and tried to come up with a suitable reply. She could not afford to offend the Esper. "If you don't mind me asking, but, why are you here?" she inquired. "We have nothing to give you. If you have a grudge against my son or Tatsumaki, let me be the one to repay it, in any way you seem fit." "Mum, no," shot back Izuku. "You don't have to." Before he could finish, he was interrupted. To everyone's surprise, Psychos burst into tears, and that was the reason. Was she truly the vicious Esper they had witnessed? I'm sorry." Psychos wiped away her tears and apologized softly. "It's just, I miss my mother so much. She was always there for me when I needed her and I killed her in my own panic." Her statement captivated Izuku and his mother. When she killed her own mother out of panic, what did she mean? Would she also murder his mother? Izuku was frightened by that final question, but luckily Psychos saw. "I guess I should explain myself. But before I do, we should wait for her." "Her?" inquired Fubuki. Psychos shut her eyes and fell silent. Before she burst open and spoke solemnly, her green aura came and went. "She's here." Fubuki, Izuku, and his mother discovered who she was referring to. With a powerful wind blowing straight in, the door abruptly blew open. Psycho's was hurled to the wall behind her before any of them could question it, and she then felt a great deal of psychic pressure on her body. Tatsumaki's voice could be heard saying, "If you wanted to die so badly, you shouldn't have come here, Psychos." The sudden flow of psychic power in the living room was causing everything to tremble violently. With a snarl on her face and eyes that were glowing bright green, the responsible Esper entered the apartment. She said angrily, "This time I'll end you right away." Because of the psychic energy present, Izuku and the others were huddled together. Despite not being at the center of it, Fubuki found it almost intoxicating. As green cracks appeared all over her body, Psychos could feel herself being torn apart. Psychos admonished her, "Tatsumaki, wait. You don't understand. At her. I'm not her. I'm not the Psychos you know." Tatsumaki shot back, "Lies," and held out her hand. "Now just die." "Kya!" exclaimed Psychos. Bright green light shone through the cracks, which were widening. Izuku's mother was holding Fubuki and her son in her arms when her son abruptly broke free and turned to face Psychos, who was crying. "She's in pain." Izuku saw right away. His body decided for itself. He hurried to Tatsumaki and closed her eyes as he held her in his arms before his mind could process the situation. The green-haired Esper was shocked and disconnected from Psychos. The purple-haired Esper fell to the ground after being released. Things eventually calmed down, but not before Tatsumaki became irate with Izuku. Tatsumaki screamed, What the hell, Midoriya?" As she pushed herself free of his hold. She turned to face him and held nothing back. "Do you know what you just did? I was just about to end her. I was going to end everything that she'll do, and you stopped me." Izuku said remorsefully, "I'm sorry," and took a step back. "My body just moved on its own." She was in pain and... "Idiot!" Tatsumaki screamed at her out of nowhere. "Are you comparing this to Bakugo? So I'm the villain now? You're an idiot, and that's really obvious right now." That was really hurtful to Izuku. She has frequently called him a fool, but this time it really got to him. "Tatsumaki, stop it," Psychos yelled abruptly. As she attempted to stand again, she was breathing heavily. She looked weak as she stumbled to her feet, even though the cracks on her body were closing. Izuku did the right thing. "I'm not your real enemy, though I take full responsibility for what I've done to you in the past." Tatsumaki remained in the same mood. To deliver the finishing blow, she merely reactivated her quirk and held out her right arm to Psychos. Psychos could tell by looking at it that Izuku couldn't stop her this time. Apologizing was the last thing she could do. She closed her eyes and spoke as she felt Tatsumaki's psychic energy on her. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." With a gasp, Tatsumaki shut down. She was somewhat perplexed. "You apologized. The Psychos I know would never apologize, unless you're not her, are you?" Psychos gave a hesitant smile and asked, "Took you this long to notice?" She straightened and regained some strength. "You're right, I'm not the Psychos that you've known for years. I'm the one that existed before or should I say, I became insane." Tatsumaki said uncertainly, "I don't understand. Now that I got a good sense of you, your essence is so much weaker than when I fought you. What's up with that?" "I can explain that, and a lot more." Tatsumaki didn't entirely believe her, but she decided to listen. Psychos used her own psychic abilities to close the door before explaining while reclined on the lonely couch. Fubuki and the mother in the room just watched as Izuku and Tatsumaki stood. There was a mystery between the two Espers, and everyone else could see it. Tatsumaki's earlier statement demonstrated that, but it did not provide a clear explanation of what transpired. Nevertheless, she gave an explanation. "I should start with when it all began 7 years ago." She responded, "You see, I was the only Esper in UA's history, and a loner when I enrolled. The only friend I had at that time was Recovery Girl. She was really sweet to me." The Esper was obviously very saddened by the pro-hero, but she refrained from crying. Izuku sensed the reason behind her behavior. Recovery Girl was the first of the heroes wounded in UA. He considered the possibility that Psychos had personally injured her. "I'm sorry, like I was saying, I was a loner before coming across the bald hero you know today, but of course back then he still had hair." According to Fubuki, Saitama, Tatsumaki crossed her arms over her chest in response to Psycho's nod. "So you do know that baldy? I was kind of hoping to meet him so he would explain his connection to you." Psychos answered, "I'm not surprised. But please don't blame him for what happened to you. It was my own fault for venturing into something I shouldn't have even considered." Oh, and what's that? In response, Psychos said, the third eye. She responded after receiving some perplexed looks, which was not surprising. The third eye is an ability an Esper can activate if they're able to achieve it. It's the power to look into the future. The future? Inquired Izuku. Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but that's what I was able to achieve. Before that time, I was best friends with Takayama and Saitama. We would go on a lot of adventures, and fight all kinds of villains and monsters. Those were really nice times. Tatsumaki frowned slightly and appeared disinterested. Like I care about your dumb adventures. Just who is Takayama? Izuku informed her. She's talking about Mount Lady. Takayama Yu is her civilian name. Psychos went on. And she was one of the few greatest people I ever met. And I almost killed her. With an angry glare, Tatsumaki said, "You're awful, we get it." She didn't feel sorry for Psychos. Now tell us what you saw. The Esper with the purple hair went on. I can't say in detail. Not because I don't want to, but because I only have a feeling of the bad things. For this version of me to survive, my subconscious made sure I somewhat forgot the terrible things that I saw, so I only know how bad they are from a feeling. Does that make sense? Tatsumaki replied, no. Fubuki raised a hand and said, I kind of do. What you basically said is that you have a gut feeling of the bad future, which is why you exist as a good person. Does that mean you're a split personality of her? Psychos grinned sweetly and said, I guess you could say that. But I like to think of myself as the old Psychos, or a split conscious that manifested itself. This time, Izuku posed the question, so does that mean the other, you, is not the real you? Psychos looked up at the ceiling and asked rhetorically, what is real or fake? Can I really say I'm the real Psychos, when I still look like myself 7 years ago? Should I say she's a fake just because she turned evil? Good and evil are just two sides of the same coin, Izuku. No matter how you debate about it, it really just depends on one's view. Garo is an example of that. With an eyebrow raised, Tatsumaki questioned, Garo. What about him? She said, pausing to glance at Izuku. He's kind of like you. If anything, he's a representation of what your life could have been if you chose a different path. Izuku's voice then grew serious as he said, I find that hard to believe. All he does is attack heroes that are just there to help people. He puts other people in danger just to make himself feel good. Psychos laughed. Everyone there was taken aback before she gave an explanation. Sorry, but that's just too hypocritical of you, Midoriya. You're following the general thought everyone has. People thought you were quirkless, and because of that they said you couldn't be a hero. You should know more than anyone how it feels to be misjudged. Izuku's mother scowled and turned her head away. She thought about the time she sobbed to her 5-year-old son years ago. At the time, she didn't think he could be a hero, and now that he was on his path to becoming one, she still felt guilty for not having faith in him when he needed her help. How is she aware of that? Izuku asked himself in his head. He turned back to his thoughts after glancing at Tatsumaki, who appeared to be only focused on Psychos. Being quirkless wasn't exactly a secret, but then again, the other version of her broke into UA and compromised the systems. She might be aware of that aspect of me based on my elementary and middle school records. Psychos responded to Izuku's mother by saying, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with assuming things. Then she got to her feet. She approached the mother and put her hand on her shoulder, saying, sometimes we believe what we see are facts, when in reality there might be something we don't really know or understand. The other Esper did not seem hostile to Tatsumaki. She nevertheless observed as the Esper looked directly into Izuku's mother's eyes. Her voice broke as she continued somberly, please, don't feel bad about what you felt that time. You were being honest, and frankly, that's all a child could ever want from a parent. A mother that is honest and yet so caring to a child, I can't tell you how nice it must be to have one around. So, please, don't be sad about. The mother seized her and dragged her to her body before she could say anything more. The action surprised Psychos, and she was about to question it when she felt the motherly embrace and heard her words. You don't have to keep fighting it. I know you missed your mother very much. Any daughter would feel that way, so feel free to let it all out. She said, are you sure? But tears were already welling up. Yes. Before the tears began to flow, Psychos didn't consider double-checking that. The boy and Fubuki felt sorry for the Esper as Izuku and the others looked on. There was nothing phony about the tears that trickled down her cheeks and soaked his mother's shirt. If anything, the Esper had to keep them to herself for a long time because they were so painful. Tatsumaki was torn about it and even averted his gaze. She found it nearly impossible to accept that this was the woman who had ruined her early years. Saiko's was dozing off on the couch, her head resting on Izuku's mother's lap as time passed. After crying for a long time, she appeared to be very content with herself. Tatsumaki turned away to go, unable to comment. The others, including Izuku, took notice. His face was inquisitive as he asked, "You're leaving?" She stopped and held out her right arm to him and his mother, saying, "Yeah, but..." For a moment, a green aura enveloped them both. "I just placed a psychic link on the both of you. That way if any of you are in danger, I can be right here to deal with it." Izuku scowled slightly. "You don't believe her, do you?" Tatsumaki turned to the door after giving Saiko's a quick glance. She was unable to bring herself to reveal her true face to Izuku. "If you know what that monster did to me, you know that there's no way I can ever forgive her." Then, as she walked out, she opened the door and shut it behind her. The three simply stared at one another as the room fell silent. They appeared to be waiting for someone to speak up. However, Saiko's groaned and opened his mother's eyes just as she was ready to do so. She muttered, "Huh, I slept off. Weird," and sat up. That remark was noted by Izuku and his mother. Why was sleeping off so strange? Even animals were capable of sleeping, just like any other person. None of them suggested asking her the question, though, as the Esper rubbed her eyes. "Well," Izuku's mother said, smiling, "I'm glad you're awake." She then got up. "I'm going to prepare the guest room. You can stay here as long as you want." A little taken aback, Saiko said, Thank you." Izuku's mother merely gave her a smile and turned to leave. When she saw that a certain Esper was missing, the only people left in the room were Saiko's, Fubuki, and Izuku. "Where's Tatsumaki?" she inquired, her expression bewildered. Approaching her, Izuku replied, "She just left. Is there something you wanted to tell her?" "Yes," she uttered, a little reluctantly. She said, even averting her eyes out of guilt. "You see, I owe it to her to explain everything that happened between us. No one should be kept in the dark, even if they want you justly dead." With a slightly perplexed expression, Fubuki said, "But you're a nice person. Why would Big Sister want to kill you? I've seen her angry before, but the way she acted earlier was really scary." Saiko's gave the young girl a pat on the head while giggling. "You really don't remember, huh? We've actually met when you were littler." "We have." Saiko's nodded, scowling. The younger Esper appeared excited and even leapt closer to her on the couch, even though it was clear from her expression that she wasn't happy about that encounter. "Then you know who my parents are, right? Big Sister never spoke about them, and I don't know why. Were they really bad people?" Saiko's turned away with a gloomy expression on her face after opening her mouth to speak. She couldn't have brought up the Esper's real origin with such ease. It was far more complicated than either Izuku or Fubuki could have imagined. At least the adolescent boy seemed to realize that it was hard to say who the parents were. He sat between her and Fubuki, feeling sorry for Saiko's because of that knowledge. "You don't have to talk if you don't feel like it. No one here will pressure you to talk about it, so at least you should." She whispered, "No, I have to. There's not enough time." "What, Izuku?" She turned her head toward him hesitantly. Before she posed the one question the teenage boy would never have anticipated, a strand of her hair was lying on the side of her face that was facing him. "Has All Might told you about the man called All for One?" Tatsumaki was heading to the city's outskirts, to a place that looked like a forest. Meanwhile, she was considering how she would handle it and how Child Emperor would respond to the unexpected appearance of Saiko's. She wasn't concerned by any of the thoughts, but she did wonder what the child pro-hero would do. Her flight was mostly uneventful until she became aware of a serious problem. The entire region that should have been the Child Emperor's covert base was utterly demolished. Pieces of the base were scattered across the ground, which was in a terrible condition. "What the hell?" she exclaimed, startled even though it was a whisper. Confused by what she was seeing, she flew down and started to walk around the area. Then her worry turned into concern, and then she felt a familiar presence and turned around. Saiko's was young. "You probably didn't know this, but Child Emperor's base was attacked by the subterranean army," she continued. Tatsumaki shouted, "What? When?" in a tone that was obviously demanding. "During the invasion at UA. Psychos solemnly disclosed. The other, me, has been searching for Child Emperor ever since she got wind that he was recruiting other heroes to recreate the Hero Association. Can the Hero Association be recreated? Something like that existed. Tatsumaki pondered. She seemed to respond, whether the Esper could read her thoughts or not. Some years after Quirks became accepted, a powerful businessman created the Hero Association in order to combat the rising threat of monsters and criminals with quirks. But it grew corrupt once he stepped down, as heroes would try to intimidate or outwit each other while trying to get to the top spot. Eventually, the government forcefully dissolved them and took over the care of raising heroes. But you could say that the Hero Association foreshadowed what is wrong with some heroes today. Tatsumaki responded, I don't care about that, and moved forward. She asked angrily, bringing her right arm to her side. Where's Child Emperor? You better not have killed him. Psychos said. No, he's not dead, fortunately. He was with some top pro heroes when the attack happened. They took him somewhere safe. Tatsumaki said, okay, so where is he? Now that she knew the child pro hero was safe, she was starting to relax. The expression on Psychos's face, however, convinced her otherwise. If I knew, the other, me, would have gone there to kill him herself. Tatsumaki let out a little growl as she opened her mouth to speak. She turned to her left and sent a psychic wave that destroyed everything in her path, expressing her sudden and inexplicable anger. Tatsumaki yelled angrily, this is all your fault, and turned to face her. Her whole face glowed green. If you hadn't tried to play hero and look into the future, I wouldn't have had such a miserable childhood. Why don't you go and die somewhere? Psychos's mouth moved, but he didn't try to mouth anything. Holding her hand together, she took in that cursed word with a pained expression. In all honesty, she had anticipated Tatsumaki to have this kind of outburst and more. However, it didn't improve her mood. I guess you have something to look forward to then, she replied. Tatsumaki's green eyes went back to normal. Huh, she asked, what are you talking about? Before her eyes widened in realization. You're not able to maintain that body, are you? Psychos could only give a feeble nod. She found it hard to acknowledge that she was truly dying. However, after swallowing some saliva, she took a deep breath and summoned the bravery to explain. Though I can be seen and felt by others, I'm not able to keep it on. Each moment I try to act like I'm a normal person is actually making me weaker. I could have just been manifested as a spirit-like being, but I wanted to feel again, even if it's for the last time. So, I have this one request from you, Tatsumaki, and I hope you actually do it, not just for me but for the safety of others. What are you talking about? Then she put a hand to the center of her chest and said, kill me, please. You have to destroy this body before it disintegrates and returns back to the other me. Because I only have visions of good, she lacks some portion of her vision of the future. Tatsumaki was, to put it mildly, stunned. As she gazed at the other Esper, she realized that, yes, she did want Psychos dead. This Psychos didn't just come to Izuku's house to defend herself, she knew that Tatsumaki would kill her without hesitation. However, she was surprised by the Esper's response. Tatsumaki used her quirk and gritted her teeth in rage. But instead of killing her with it, she spoke while floating off the ground. You think I'm going to give you the satisfaction of death just because you asked? Screw you. She yelled, Tatsumaki, wait. But it was too late. Tatsumaki took off from the area at a nearly blinding speed. Psychos felt a sense of dread as he observed her retreating body. She clutched her stomach and collapsed to her knees as her body felt suddenly weaker. Then she heard laughter. You're just so stupid. You. Young Psychos gritted her teeth and spoke. Adult Psychos materialized before her in a hazy shape that was similar to that of her monster. She started to mockingly talk to her while floating around her. You thought asking her to kill you would save you from me. You should have known that Esper won't help you, and because of that it will cause her dearly when I destroy everything she holds dear. I can already picture the look of regret on your face. Why? Psychos stumbled to her feet and asked feebly. Why do you do this? Don't you understand you're trying to kill innocent lives that just want to live in peace? Adult Psychos stopped in front of her and joked, peace. This world is wasted on the humanity. This world is finite, its resources finite. As humans have been left unchecked, their existence must cease to exist. Humans needs correctness. You don't know that, exclaimed young Psychos. But before she knew it, the malevolent Esper had given her the backhand and knocked her to the ground on her front. With a slight frown on her face, the adult Esper said as she withdrew her hand. I'm the only one who knows, at least, I'm the only one to act on it. I will shred this world of man down to its last atom and then, with me in charge, I shall create a new world of monsters. It's not what is lost but only what it has been given, a grateful world. After saying that, the Esper-based mist transformed into a black tornado and vanished almost immediately. Psychos was left alone, breathing heavily on her knees and arms, her eyes fixed on the spot where her evil self had been. I have to do something, even if I have to die trying, she murmured. Some of the pro-heroes were feeling festive when the following day began. When Yu was eventually allowed to leave the hospital, King decided that they ought to get together for a little get-together and catch up on old times. The three of them would be doing something enjoyable together for the first time in years. From behind, King said, "Now remember, Takayama, you can't use your quirk yet. Your body still needs to heal." He had a carton box in his hands. As Yu walked beside Saitama, he joked, I know. Geez, you're such a dad, King." They were both dressed in civilian clothes. Their presence in the hospital was well known to the media. News crews flocked to the front to speak with Yu after she was discharged, but word had already spread from the hospital. She would be leaving the hospital for the first time since her fight with Garo. The world wanted to know how she was feeling, which was not surprising. Yu was an attention seeker. No one knew her better than she did. However, she and Saitama and King had sneaked out of the hospital and arrived at her apartment complex. Just as they were about to leave for her apartment, an unexpected figure emerged from the hallway. Millions of people all over the world were thinking about his endearing toothy smile. There was no mistaking that muscular build and blonde hair, styled in a way that only one pro-hero could have had, even though he was dressed as a civilian. All Might said, "Takayama Yu, welcome back from the hospital." All Might, Yu exclaimed in shock. When Saitama and King saw him, they were quite at ease. In contrast to her, they were accustomed to seeing the pro-hero because they had previously interacted with him in a variety of ways. However, given that this was her first time meeting the top pro-hero in person, they recognized how amazing the experience was for her. All Might stood brightly and said to her, "I would have come to the hospital, but it would appear you are the talk of the city. I find that as a good thing. You've become a shining beacon of hope, Mount Lady. For that, I thank you." Yu blushed and smiled slightly, saying, It's fine. Really." King and Saitama looked at one another with expressionless eyes. Yu was behaving like a pro-hero they were accustomed to seeing. But instead of discussing it, Saitama pretended to yawn, interrupting the conversation. The final line sounded a little scary. "Oh wow, Toshinori. I didn't know you would show up, uninvited." When the number 1 pro-hero learned of it, he was somewhat surprised. "Oh, is that so, Saitama? Perhaps I should have called." Yu turned back to All Might after giving Saitama a low growl. "No, you can come with us. The more the merrier, right, Saitama and King?" King shrugged his shoulders and said, "Sure, I don't mind." Reluctantly, Saitama said, "Yeah, I guess." Thus, the matter was resolved immediately. The three of them were escorted by All Might to Yu's apartment, where their small celebration would be held. After giving it some thought, Saitama turned to Yu and inquired, "By the way, Takayama, do you mind if I stay at your place for a while?" Yu's face flushed severely as she heard it. "Why you want to live with me, Saitama?" "Yeah, but just until I can find another apartment. Some reporters found out where I live, and they're going to be annoying to my quiet life. I might as well move to somewhere until I can get another super cheap place to live." King never got why Saitama was drawn to bargains and low prices. All Might, who had his own lodging, was no different. Despite receiving a high salary from the government, Saitama, who was ranked among the top 3 heroes in the world, chose to live in such a cheap place. The two heroes couldn't understand it, but at least they assumed he was being modest or humble. Yu had another thought. As they strolled, she couldn't help but think about the possibility of Saitama living with her. Her face started to flush and her heart began to race at the mere thought of them living together as a married couple. "I'm living with Saitama. Is that actually going to occur?" she pondered. "Of course, Genos would have to stay too. Knowing him, he'll want to stay close to me. Speaking of which, I wonder how he's doing. I haven't heard anything from him since." Yu stopped and yelled, "No, Genos will not live with us." She reciprocated by subtly making the men accompanying her halt and turn to face her. It caused her to take a slight detour. I mean, my apartment can just fit for 2 people, so having Genos with us would be too much. Besides, he's a young cyborg man, right? He can live on his own. After giving it some thought, Saitama answered, "You're right. But knowing him, he'll probably want to stay in the same apartment building. I don't know how he'll do it, though." A hopeful Yu said, "Then you'll stay with me." Saitama smiled slightly and said, "Sure. I hope I'm not too much trouble though. I have my own toothbrush, so that won't be a problem." Yu grinned and laughed and said, "No, none at all." She proceeded to pass the others. Her expression was similar to that of a schoolgirl anticipating a date. All Might and King, who looked at one another and smiled wryly, were aware of her mood, but Saitama was not. King called out, "Saitama," and touched the bald hero's shoulder. "I never thought you'd be so bold to actually stay in another woman's house." All Might put his hand on the free shoulder and said, "I quite agree. Just remember to respect each other's privacy, though I would understand if you and the young lady become closer." Pushing their hands away from his shoulders, Saitama questioned, "What are you two talking about? This is just a temporary stay. You guys are being weirder than usual." "Weirder," King exclaimed, "than usual," was how All Might felt. Saitama decided to disregard that. Meanwhile, he spoke again as Yu opened the door to her apartment. "Besides, Tatsumaki is probably planned to move out too. I don't see that girl ever staying at that apartment with all those." Kya, the 3 professional heroes were immediately notified. Fearing the worst, they turned to Yu and were shocked to see her sitting on the floor with someone Saitama and King could only recall from 9 years prior. "Psychos!" cried both heroes, startled. As they had seen, Child Psychos was focused on Yu, not in a menacing way, but with a genuine expression that came through in her words. Yu said, "I'm so glad that you're okay. It had been minutes since the surprise visit." Young Psychos was given the opportunity to explain herself in front of the professional heroes after the initial shock subsided. When she had first arrived, All Might had been the most tense and, had it not been for Yu, would have even gone on the attack. Even though he hasn't had the opportunity to battle adult Psychos, he has witnessed some of her quirk in her monster form. Thankfully, violence was unnecessary. With the exception of the emotional part involving her mother, young Psychos described everything as she had in Izuku's house. She continued by explaining why she was in the team's house. It should come as no surprise that the top pro hero was concerned about his pupil. It was clear from his expression that Psychos had visited that place. The pro hero made a mental note to check up on the boy later, even though the Esper quickly assured him that he was safe. Psychos concluded the explanation by saying, "And so, here we are." Every hero appeared to be thinking deeply as the room fell silent. Even Saitama, the professional hero who detested lengthy conversations, had absorbed all of this information and appeared to be thinking about it. Yu, however, was the one who approached Psychos after getting up from her couch. Her expression was emotionless as she said, "So, it really is you." When Psychos said, "Yes," she bowed her head in embarrassment and sorrow. "I'm sorry for what I did back then. I wasn't myself, and yet I almost crushed you to death. You can do whatever you want to me. I deserve it. Oh, believe me, I will." Her next move caught everyone off guard. Lifting her hand, the female hero gave Psychos a slap across the left cheek. The Esper was knocked to the ground on her butt by the forceful blunt of the slap. "Takayama," King exclaimed, startled. "What are you doing?" "That's our Psychos," she said in a deep, solemn voice. "I slapped her, she deserved it." She covered most of her face with her blonde hair and made sure she was close to Psychos when she went on one knee. "I almost died that day. Because of her, people started looking down on Saitama, and I lost a friend before I knew it. She's also the cause of the monster attack in the city, which led me to confront Garo and almost die." Her voice alone created a great deal of tension. Saitama moved forward to confront Yu, but All Might's arm stopped him. The bald hero stayed back and watched as the pro hero gave him a stern look. She lifted her fist in preparation to strike the Esper back at Yu. She wasn't even sure what to do next because her emotions were so contradictory. That was likely the cause of her unsteady hand, and before she knew it, she pushed forward and encircled young Psychos with her arms. "So why?" Yu's eyes began to well up with tears as her voice broke down. "Why can't I hate you? I hate what you did, and yet I can't find it in my heart to despise you." She soon started sobbing on the adolescent girl's chest. It surprised young Psychos, who then turned to face Saitama doubtfully. She looked back at her friend and patted her head in response to the bald hero's simple shrug of his shoulders. She said, "For what it's worth, I'm sorry, you." Young Psychos continued to console her in silence as the sobbing persisted. All Might rose from a chair and removed his hand from Saitama. He wanted to talk to Saitama about something. When there's conflict between old friends, an intervention can be helpful, but, when it has been built up, the only way of reconciliation is between those friends. Only then can they finally find the resolve to move past the wall between them. Saitama made a mental note of it. Almost invariably, All Might had lessons of this type. The bald hero understands why the pro hero refrained from stepping in. Only the two of them could resolve the dispute between Psychos and you. Now then, All Might pumped his fist in the air as his toothy grin reappeared. Let's celebrate. Not only has the young lady returned from the hospital, but so has an old friend from the past. This is more than a reason to celebrate. Yu withdrew from the Esper after ceasing to cry. She wiped the tears from her face while they were both on the ground, and her eyes were a little red from the tears. He's right, so, can you stay back, it'll be like old times. Psychos grinned broadly. Sure, one of the most memorable events in their lives was what transpired next. The group reacted however they saw fit to celebrate Psychos' return. They enjoyed some soft drinks while reminiscing about the past while cracking jokes. In addition to giving them some snacks, Yu reprimanded King and Saitama for any infractions. It all went smoothly, and Psychos relished every second of it. This was the feeling she had been craving for years, even though she didn't express it. She felt a strong sense of nostalgia for her time spent with her friends. With a kind smile, she reflected, it's almost like we never separated. It would seem that Yu's game console was in the box he was carrying earlier, and King and Saitama eventually proceeded to play video games on Yu's TV. Although she was a little let down, Yu stayed behind with All Might and Psychos and let them play their game. After sitting back between them, she let out a sigh. They were seated at her dining table, where they could see the two professional heroes engaged in their game. Saitama's attempt to defeat King was unsurprising, but ultimately unsuccessful. With a laugh, All Might remarked, "So, this is one battle that Saitama can't win. Looks like he's frustrated." Yu's tone was dry as he said, "No surprise there. King always beat him in these games, even when he went easy on him." Psychos laughed. "Yeah, like that one time he only used his thumbs, and still beat Saitama." Yu laughed and said, "Saitama sure threw a tantrum." Then she had an epiphany. Oh no. As soon as King won, the game announced a KO. When Saitama's face turned red, it was evident that his blood was starting to pump. Saitama yelled and hurled the gamepad at the screen, saying, "Damn this stupid game. Even after 7 years of practice, I still can't beat you." His throw was so strong that it shattered Yu's flat-screen TV. Saitama realized what he had done as glass fragments flew everywhere and smoke rose from the hole in the screen. A sense of dread then began to creep over him, and before he knew it, he felt two arms encircling his waist. "Saitama," Saitama said. "Takayama, wait, I can," but it was too late. Yu performed a German suplex after lifting the professional athlete off his feet. Yu's words reached the hero, causing his bald head to dent her floor. "Don't go about breaking my stuff again, you moron." Flawless victory. KO. All Might raises an eyebrow, again. To be honest, he was taken aback by Yu's ease in defeating Saitama. Psychos responded, "Well, this isn't the first time Saitama broke her stuff." The scene shifted to Saitama and King both bowing down before Yu. The female pro hero was giving them stern criticism for what they had done. Before the top pro hero called her, Psychos and All Might watched. "Excuse me for calling you so sudden, but there's one thing that has been bothering me for a while now," he replied. After that, their relationship shifted from being lighthearted to being a little intense. Psychos didn't have to look him in the eye to know, "I was wondering if you would ask." "It's about him, isn't it?" "All for one." All Might gave a silent nod. "So, he's still out there, even after I defeated him all those years ago." "Yes, but you did quite the number on him." Then All Might sighed, "I imagine. I was hoping that young Midoriya won't have to fight him. But, if he's still out there, I have to stop him before he causes more harm." Psychos concurred, but for a different reason. "You should. I fear that, it won't be long before Tatsumaki finds out about him." Finds out. This shift was new. All Might looked at her, perplexed. What about Midoriya? Psychos then fell silent, saying, I'm not talking about him, but the one whom you fought. All Might was intrigued by that silence, whether she realized it or not, and his mind raced until his eyes widened and an idea struck him. No, it can't be. All Might was genuinely frightened by what had occurred to him for the first time in a long time. Are you telling me that he is related to her? For the first time since the conversation, she turned to face him gravely and uttered the 7 words that would stick in his head, not just related. All for One is the true father of Tatsumaki and Fubuki. All Might was utterly stunned. Despite his attentive listening, he was unable to respond with any words. Psychos had a lot of questions after seeing how serious she was in her eyes. Then she said something that would make him even more startled. And as I speak to you now, one of them has a new form of his quirk in her blood. All for One, reborn. For All Might, at least, time passed rather quickly. Even Saitama was not informed of the startling discovery by the pro-hero. They already knew each other well enough about All for One and his past with All Might. Nevertheless, he decided not to inform Saitama. Perhaps Saitama's enjoyment of young Psychos and the others was the reason. The Esper had acted more solemnly earlier, but he never mentioned it. All Might nearly forgot what she had told him because of the smile on her face. Not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't stay there for long. He needed to save an hour of his metamorphosis in case there was any trouble in the city because his time was almost up. Since only Saitama was aware of his condition, he made the decision to depart. Luckily, they didn't notice that his mood had changed. All Might grinned nonchalantly and congratulated you on her speedy recuperation. Following a few cordial conversations, he gave the group of friends his signature smile and walked off the apartment floor. Only when he was positive no one was looking did he change back. He emerged grimly from the front door of the apartment. Other than being a scrawny and unattractive version of his muscular self, he wasn't much to see in his skinny form. But that didn't matter because he was finally able to reflect on young Psychos' significant revelation. Tatsumaki and Fubuki were fathered by All for One. How could that have happened? Tatsumaki has been acquainted with the pro-hero for nearly a year. Yes, she dislikes heroes, but Izuku's personality was gradually making that go away. She never did anything bad that would associate her with a villain, nor did she ever act as though she wanted to harm heroes like her father. The more he considered it, the more he thought about Tatsumaki. Since he had only met her once, he knew very little about her younger sister. She was taken from him by Tatsumaki after he knocked her out back then. What was the reason behind her actions? He hardly knew for sure. He could only surmise that it was during a time when she felt uneasy in his presence. In fact, he realized that the heroes versus villains test he oversaw in Ua was the last time he had seen Tatsumaki in person. Then he had a terrible thought. In reality, Tatsumaki had been the antagonist. Whether intentional or not, the Esper had in fact displayed a potentially malevolent aspect of herself. All Might had assumed at the time that she was merely attempting to highlight Uraraka and Izuku's potential. He was no longer sure, though. And now there was the All for One, reborn problem. Neither the quirk nor the sister who possesses it were ever mentioned by young Psychos. He knew that either Fubuki or Tatsumaki had it. His initial assumption was that it belonged to Fubuki, but then he had another idea. Tatsumaki had kept her peculiarity a secret since middle school. After becoming a teacher, All Might checked her records and discovered this. Since she had registered under that name, her middle school assumed she just had a telekinesis quirk. What does that mean she isn't concealing her unique talent? Esper was hardly known to All Might. Tatsumaki never came up to her to inquire about it, despite the fact that he was constantly present in Ua. Except in dire circumstances, the pro-hero disliked violating people's privacy. The more he considered her, the more he thought about her. Without much resistance, Tatsumaki accepted her fate when she was compelled to join Ua. She did express some disapproval of it, to be sure, but never to the extent of endangering other people, particularly the government officials. The principal was the reason All Might knew so much about this. He also remembered the time she had rescued Izuku and Bakugo from the mud villain. Despite having the option to abandon them, she made the extra effort to save them both in front of the media. The way she vanquished the villain was the only issue All Might discovered. If not for the mud villain's body composition, he might have been killed. All Might now had a better understanding of her. Tatsumaki was a decent person in her own right, but she had some shortcomings that needed to be addressed. It would be catastrophic for both Izuku and the entire world if she followed her father's path. Tatsumaki was incredibly strong. That was beyond question. From the first time he fought her to the second time she attempted to use a psychic bind on him, All Might was aware of this fact. All Might was lucky that the girl had been suffering from a severe headache at the time of their first encounter. Regarding the second encounter, she had just given up trying to hold him back after he came out as himself. In all honesty, the pro-hero wasn't certain he could defeat her in the event that she became evil. To take her down without putting civilians in danger, he would undoubtedly need to be in his prime, but perhaps he could if he pushed himself past his breaking point. There was still a lot to think about. However, the pro-hero wasn't sure which to take first and thought about. All for One, however, was one item that did cause him concern. The villain would definitely come for his daughters, especially the one who possesses his quirk, if he were to recover. At the thought, he gave a low growl. He still had One for All, so he couldn't allow that to occur. Might whispered, "I'll have to do something." However, there was a minor issue. How can he go up to Tatsumaki and genuinely show her the way? It wasn't like he and the Esper got along well, and he already had Izuku as an apprentice. A voice that was unexpected but familiar cut him off before he could finish his thought. "So, you're still thinking about it?" All Might looked to his right and saw the Esper. "Huh, psychos?" he asked. It was a mystery in and of itself how she had gotten there without his knowledge. The Esper had her face partially covered by a blue hoodie. Only because she was facing him while they were walking did the pro-hero notice. "Mind not saying that name out loud. I'm kind of a criminal too thanks to that other me." All Might said, "Oh right. Sorry." Then he had an idea, and when he turned back to her, his eyes grew wide. "Wait, you know who I am?" "Yes, I know it's quite shocking, but I know thanks to her." That made the pro-hero a little anxious. Fortunately, he managed to gather his thoughts and asked the question that was on his mind. He needed to know, how. Psychos disclosed, "She's been extremely busy for the last 3 years. Ever since we left Saitama and the others, she has been busy observing and gathering information on both monsters and humans. She found out about your condition a few years ago." All Might was nearly unable to speak. What young psychos had feared had been validated by his revelation. But when he turned away and muttered, he could hardly conceal his surprise. "I see." Silence fell between the two for a moment. Then All Might posed another query. "So, if she knows about One for All and has been in touch with All for One, does that mean she knows about the boy? Just how involved has she become in UA?" Young Psychos was a little impressed. "You suspect something worse, huh?" "Yes, she knows about Izuku. As for UA, she has been watching for a very long time, but because of Tatsumaki, she had to be subtle." Why? He was now interested in the green-haired Esper once more. Tatsumaki's quirk is stronger than she knows. Psychos fears that she might incidentally trigger it if Tatsumaki discovered her influence in the school within the shadows. That's why, when she needed to hack the systems directly, she released that video with Tatsumaki and Geno's fighting. All Might remarked, "So it makes sense now." Knowing the girl would be distracted socially by the staff and students, she would be so distracted that she won't even notice the other you when she makes her move. "Yes, but Garo was eager to fight you, thus almost ruining her plans. Tatsumaki would have interfered if it weren't for the exposure the school was getting at the time. But I doubt she would have held back if psychos attacked the students." It sounded more like a confirmation than a query, so that's why she didn't go inside the main building. But Tatsumaki ended up fighting her in the presence of the whole world. "Yes, but only because that other me feared Garo was in danger." "But what about me? Does Tatsumaki think of me badly?" "I think you should find that out for yourself. I don't hold all the answers. But I'd recommend changing UA's technological systems entirely. Psychos was the reason Tatsumaki played the villain in that test of yours in UA." He then asked one question that had been bothering him, saying, "I'll let the principal know when I go to UA tomorrow. There's so many questions I want to ask. But I'll start with the one that has been bothering me. What is All for One Reborn?" Psychos was about to respond. He was returning to Japan, sweet mask. He had a reason for that, but he appeared to be at least a little at ease while sitting on a beach chair and on his yacht. His laptop, which was resting on his lap, had a picture of modern-day Fubuki on the right side of the screen and a list of facts about her on the left. All for One Reborn. A quirk that is a combination of All for One and an unnamed quirk that surpasses the likes of its father and One for All. With this quirk, the user can not only create a quirk in a quirkless human, but evolve one's quirk to become either an entirely different quirk or a stronger version. Sweet Mask stopped and took a sip of his beverage. He grinned as he read the rest in his head after dropping it. Looks like the catalyst is indeed this quirk, and Fubuki is the one who possesses. But since she was born as an Esper, it's classified as a special ability. She can pass it down like one for all and all for one, but she can never use the quirks that she creates or evolves in another person. He then shut down his laptop. Now, the only problem is getting close to her. I thought I would have to wait my time and try to convince her to come to my side without her sister's involvement. But, Psychos has made her move, and it appears that I'll need Mob and his master sooner than I expected. Did you call me? When Sweet Mask turned around, she saw the Mob exiting the boat. At first, the pro hero was taken aback and briefly questioned whether he had been heard. After calming down, he got up and faced the situation. I was thinking about how you and your master can help me. But don't worry too much. All you have to do is handle the spirit, like you always do. With a blank expression, Mob said, I see. Then he turned around and entered the house. With a cheeky grin, Sweet Mask turned back to face the ocean. If I can get my hands on Fubuki, I can raise a world of true heroism. Not the present one that has been plagued with hypocrites, but a world where the ideals of heroes are truly founded. Get ready, Psychos, because I'm coming for you with the very Esper that can defeat you. She could feel All Might's inability to speak after young Psychos finished her explanation. Since this was a quirk that literally has the power to change the world, his response was not surprising. Of the human population, 80% have a quirk, while the remaining 1% have none at all. The quirk was also known as the One Quirk, according to young Psychos. If Fubuki was given to the wrong person, she could make all the difference. All Might was deeply concerned at the mere prospect. He then turned back to young Psychos with a few more questions about it. You mentioned another quirk. I'm assuming it has to do with their mother. Who is she? Young Psychos appeared to know the mother, and he needed the answer. The pro hero might be able to learn more about the Esper sisters' past if he could track down the mother, whoever she was. However, there was also the persistent suspicion that she might not be alive. But young Psychos' attitude shifted. She turned her gaze from All Might to the floor. The pro hero was alarmed by this abrupt shift and put his hand on her shoulder. Before he knelt on one knee and spoke, they both stopped. If this is too hard for you to say, then you don't have to talk. Psychos looked at him and interrupted, no, it's not that. She had a worried and afraid expression on her face. I'm just scared of what you would do if I told you. All Might was now very interested and worried. Who was the mother who could have caused the Esper to experience this kind of fear? Did All Might know who she was? All Might did know some women, but he didn't spend much time with people of the other sex. But before All for One could reach the Esper sisters, he needed to know the truth so that he could help them. So he stared at Psychos gravely, mentally bracing himself for the worst. Does Tatsumaki and Fubuki know about her and All for One? He inquired. No. Young Psychos appeared to feel a little more at ease. Tatsumaki has been fed false memories of her parents. She believes that they sold her off to the other me. Oh, a new question just came up. However, I'll have to set that aside and address the primary issue. Then, before he reaches the girls, I still have an opportunity to stop All for One. But you'll need to tell me the truth. So, you still want to know the mother's identity, huh? As cowardly as it may seem, I have to stop him while he's still recovering. Yes, and All for One's secret hideout. All Might continued. Before it's too late, please let me know. Young Psychos remained silent for a moment, thinking about what to do. The news would undoubtedly weigh heavily on All Might, but she was prepared to protect the girls if it meant doing so. Teenage Psychos opened her mouth to say, very well, the mother of Tatsumaki and Fubuki is. But before she could reveal it, a set of wings shot straight ahead, sending her hurtling to the concrete floor a few meters from All Might, where she screamed in agony. Pro hero number 4, Wings, has arrived at the scene, and he wasn't alone. The pro hero watched her as she lay on the ground unconscious, and he turned to see where the attack had come from. When it hit the ground, he recognized the face. A group of heroes descended from the dragon, which was flying and flapping its amazing wings above them, and landed in their own unique fashion. Flashy Flash, Darksheen, also known as Blackluster, Child Emperor, Tanktop Master, Kamui Woods, Endeavor, and Best Jeanist were among the top pro heroes who had arrived. These heroes' presence was enough to create a minor disturbance, and as onlookers gathered at the scene, JSDF vans unexpectedly pulled up, their backs opening to let numerous soldiers rush out brandishing their weapons. While some of the soldiers ran to Psychos's unconscious body and aimed their weapons at her, others formed a perimeter to keep the bewildered crowd back. "What's happening?" All Might, who had been pushed back when young Psychos was attacked, asked as he got to his feet. With his burning hand, Endeavor restrained him. "Remain back, citizen," he declared. "At last, you are safe from the evil Esper." All Might thought, safe? What is he talking about? It was obvious that Endeavor wouldn't recognize his fellow pro hero in his current form, but he couldn't reveal his secret to so many people, so it wasn't like he could change into the pro hero All Might. A worried source informed us that the Esper was using daylight to control a citizen. She clearly had some evil intent when she made herself appear to be a teenager. However, you can now leave for home. We've got this covered. All Might was almost unable to speak. There was something highly suspicious about that information, but he obviously couldn't say it there. He had to discover the truth, and in order to do so, he made the decision to leave the scene. Child Emperor nodded in response to Endeavor's call, and when his backpack opened, two large mechanical hands held a pair of handcuffs, which, of course, weren't just any handcuffs, in their hands. When he approached the unconscious Esper and put the handcuffs on her wrists, young Psychos's body trembled for a moment and she let out a groan, but she eventually calmed down. Child Emperor declared, "Secured." Flashy Flash watched as Best Jeanist lifted the unconscious Esper into an open van using his quirk, and before a soldier closed the door, Endeavor and Child Emperor climbed inside. With a hint of irritation, Flashy Flash remarked, "I can't believe I was called in for something so minor." "You witnessed what the woman did with those monsters," Sadarksheen warned. "Don't say that, Flashy Flash." To keep her in check, even some of the best heroes had to be called in. "I've heard that we're escorting her to a subterranean base a few cities away." Flashy Flash listened to his fellow pro hero and glanced up at the dragon above them, which was Yukio, the number 11 pro hero, who appeared to be the lookout and had not yet detected anything. The blonde pro hero said, "I see." He then started to walk toward a van and said, "I'll be inside. Let's wait and see what she does when I'm around." Tanktop Master watched as Darksheen nodded. Nearly all of the heroes were on board a van that could hold them when the escort started, and the JSDF, working with the police, requested that everyone stay inside buildings, particularly those where the escort would take place, because nobody wanted to be caught off guard by a monster. An hour had gone by since the capture, and the only sounds coming from the vans were the engines and the slight trembling of the road. All the heroes in the escort were silent, but that changed when young Psychos started to stir. She groaned before her eyelids closed. The last time she recalled was when she was speaking with All Might, and even though she knew something was off, she was still taken aback when she realized she was in a new setting. "What? Where am I? Ah." When young Psychos attempted to move her arms, the handcuffs caused electric shocks to shoot through her, causing her to scream. She panted and focused to keep her form as her body trembled from the pain. Psychos pondered, "What is this? What's going on? It is not worth your time." Endeavor, who was sitting right in front of her and wearing a frown, told her, "You're not getting out of those." Knowing that her older self had defeated the pro hero flawlessly the last time, young Psychos was a little intimidated by that look, but she forced herself to sit up and ignored her fear. "You're wrong. The Psychos you encountered is not me." "And what are you?" sneered the pro hero. "Never mind. I don't have to talk to people like you," he said, turning away. "You'll answer all of your questions with your monster association when we arrive at your cell." "Cell? What are you?" When she turned to her left, young Psychos came to a stop. She was shocked to see Child Emperor sitting near the only entrance, even though she had assumed that she and Endeavor were the only people in the van. Young Psychos thought, "He's here. Dote. He must be really uncomfortable sitting next to me because that other version of me did so many terrible things to him back in Oxform Labs, but I have to warn them. The fact that I was discovered means that she set this up. Dote, please, I implore you to listen." She yelled in distress. "You're all in danger. The other me has lied to all of you. Although I understand that you find it difficult to accept, you must." "Enough." Endeavor stomped his foot on the metal floor and roared. Young Psychos screamed and raised her feet to her seat, nearly struck by Endeavor's flames, but the pro hero's attitude toward her remained unchanged. It was pointless to try to persuade any of them, so young Psychos turned his head away. Child Emperor purposefully ignored her, as was somewhat to be expected, and he most likely must have mustered this much bravery simply to be in her presence. However, she was aware that none of that would matter in the near future. In fact, it won't matter at all because it actually happened. She felt a familiar presence before turning to face the two heroes with a dejected expression. She's here. That warning confused and somewhat alarmed both Endeavor and Child Emperor. Who exactly was she referring to, they wondered. None that brought them any closer to the truth. Before they could even ask, they heard crackling laughter, followed by a loud, monstrous scream, and the van swiftly swerved to avoid hitting anything. Some of the occupants braced themselves for the abrupt change, and the soldiers and most of the heroes saw the scene right in front of them when it was safe to evacuate. In the middle of the road, Yukio lay battered, back in her human form, though it was clear from the enormous crater she lay in that she had once been a dragon. The first heroes to rush to her were Edgeshot and Best Jeanist, and the other heroes watched with concern as the latter carried her to a sitting position. What took place? Best Jeanist inquired. Edgeshot stated, "That's what I'd like to know." Yukio said in a faint voice, "Her," and managed to point ahead of them before fainting and losing consciousness. "She's here." The others glanced in the direction she indicated, just in time to see who she was referring to. Adult Psychos appeared out of a suspicious purple mist, her smile unmistakable, and the fact that she was in her monster form startled them. "Heroes, I apologize for hurting your little escort, but I have to get my delivery." No animosity. Only a handful of the heroes were able to conceal their shock, but it was evident on their faces. "How? But I thought she was locked up with you guys, Endeavor," Darksheen asked. Endeavor struggled to reply, recalling the exact words of the younger Psychos, and trying to convince himself that she had not really attempted to warn them. But it made no difference because they were facing a grave danger. With determination, Edgeshot said, "Then let's take her down. Just in front of you." Darksheen charged at her with that. He did not deter the adult Psychos, who, unbeknownst to the heroes, had one of her creations, a small, winged Cyclops monster, watching the entire scene from above. This creature had the ability to intercept all of the news stations she had previously hacked, but it was unclear why she wanted to do this. Darksheen appeared and swung his fist directly at her face, but Psychos retaliated by extending her arm before it could hit, and in a moment, Darksheen was within her psychic grasp. The last thing he saw was her snicker. Psychos had no intention of confronting him directly, so she swung her arm back, sending the pro hero hurtling through the air until he was no longer visible. With a swift response, Best Jeanist extended his arms to Psychos and grabbed hold of the fabric of her garments, momentarily stopping her advance before she outdid him. Best Jeanist was unable to break free from her bind, particularly after discovering that the fibers of his own clothing had tied him out. She then pushed her arms aside, nullifying his effect, and stretched her arm to him, causing him to fly up close to her. He was easily backhanded by Psychos, who then collided with one of the vans. The others turned to Edgeshot, who said, "We have to attack her all at once." "You're correct." Endeavor extended both of his hands and nodded. He unleashed a stream of flames directly at the malevolent Esper as the other heroes moved aside, but sadly, none of them made contact. Psychos raised a shield without moving, keeping the flames at bay. With a cunning smile, she remarked, "I believe we've already decided that your flames have no effect on me." "I know, but, of course this is just a cover." At that moment, Edgeshot moved and materialized right behind her. The pro hero had thinned his body to the size of a thread by traveling faster than sound, and because Psychos was unable to react in time, she was attacked. Every blow he delivered to her blood vessels was intended to render her incapacitated. Once he was positive of each wound, he immediately left her, and Wings assumed control by soaring in her direction. "I've stopped her blood supply," Edgeshot declared. "After that, I'll do the finishing." Because his wings were so painfully bent that blood spurted out, he was unable to maintain his motion in the air and fell to the ground, suffering minor cuts. Even though Wings wasn't any faster than Edgeshot, he shouldn't have been taken down so easily, but he was caught before he knew it, even though he had put some distance between him and Psychos. "That's impossible," Edgeshot thought. "I was traveling faster than sound." Psychos said, "That was cute. But keep this in mind. An Esper doesn't care about speed." She then proceeded to electrocute him, forcing Edgeshot to return to normal before grabbing him by the neck and punching him in the face, giving the pro hero the full blunt of it before he fell to the ground unconscious. Flashy Flash moved, and before anyone could blink, he was behind her, with his sword sheathed and his back to her. Flashy, heavy slash, he yelled. The pro hero had made sure he hit key points on Psychos's body after surpassing the speed of light, but even after that, the monster turned her head back at him and remarked, "So, you really are the fastest." Flashy Flash spat blood out of his mouth, and pieces of his clothing flew into the air before he collapsed to the ground, hurt and immobile. Tank Top tackle. Tank Top Master chuckled, while rushing towards her with his arms crossed. His eyes were burning with hatred and determination. "You won't get away with that." He was so close to the evil Esper when he was taken by surprise, and she easily lifted him off the ground by grabbing his face, then taking a step forward and slapping the back of his head against the ground. Tank Top Master was down, and when she pulled her hand away, blood oozed out of a huge crack beneath the pro hero. Kamui Woods jumped into the air and thrust his hands forward into many roots to seize her, but that was insufficient to stop her from being attacked again as soon as she straightened up. The roots were completely destroyed with a single glance, and Kamui was struck by a psychic blast that sent her hurtling out of the area. After using the opportunity the heroes provided to make it happen, the JDSF troops discovered a harsh reality and began firing from nearly every direction. "What are you all up to? Return," Endeavor bellowed. "Too late," Psychos said, then burst out laughing, and the aura around her intensified. The bullets were hurled back at the soldiers at that very moment, but Endeavor was able to hit each one with his flames, saving the men in uniform. Psychos sighed a little and said, "You heroes think you can protect everyone. But that's impossible against the inevitable." The horror was so great that many viewers gasped in shock and horror, while others turned away as each soldier was suddenly enveloped in a purple aura and launched through bricks and winds. Endeavor grew enraged and rushed at Psychos with all his strength, turning his red flames blue before punching her in the chest and waist, but even as he gave her an uppercut, nothing happened. Upon impact, Psychos's head turned back to face him. "I see a final stand. I'll admit it's admirable, but it's pointless." She then punched him with her fist. Endeavor was determined not to allow that to happen, so he grabbed her arm with both arms and used his arms to power up so much of his quirk that Psychos's body was completely covered in blue flames, but he knew it wasn't enough. Since he was the only hero left, Endeavor let out a loud cry and kept pouring in as much as he could to burn the evil Esper because he couldn't let her get away with the murder she had just committed. Sadly, his efforts were in vain, and as he continued to pour in his rage and hatred, he noticed that his flames were going out more quickly, until only her arm was left covered in his flames. Psychos effortlessly pushed that arm down, and even though the pro hero was strong, he discovered that her push alone was enough to knock him onto his right knee. However, he refused to give up, not now or ever, and he took his left hand away from her, stretched it toward her face, and then sprayed it with more blue fire. Psychos simply blew some wind from her lips in response, and Endeavor was shocked when his flames were extinguished. She then grabbed his other arm and drew back her right fist. "Endeavor, let this teach you a lesson." She ended the fight by punching him so hard in the face that the pro hero fell hard to the ground, saying, "You can't stop the inevitable." Psychos had no one to stop him now. Inside the van, the young Psychos sensed it. For a brief moment, there was silence as the child emperor considered his own move, but young Psychos interrupted him. "Dote, you must murder me." This time she caught his attention. Young Psychos said, "She's pursuing me in order to reintegrate me into herself. She will gain strength and future knowledge if she does that." Child Emperor turned doubtfully, but even if he thought about it, it was too late. The van was raised into the air before it exploded in a flash, and young Psychos was thrown out of it without Child Emperor's presence. She moaned softly as she hit the ground, which was right at the evil Esper's feet, and then she looked up at her adult self. They made eye contact, though their expressions were different. While the adult Psychos appeared excited to see her, the young Psychos was afraid. "I'm grateful, myself. I was finally able to murder that young hero because of you." As her adult self turned away from her and gazed around at the fallen heroes, young Psychos's head hit the ground and she started crying for the missing hero. "Despite the fact that you were all idiots in the end," she gloated, "I must commend you heroes for what you did here. You came right in and gave me my other half. All I had to do was make up a report. I would have gotten her sooner, of course, but I preferred to watch her pass away gradually. Only after realizing that she was divulging secrets did I reply." The same was true for Flashy Flash and Yukio, who were both severely injured but still willing to fight. Wings moaned and tried to get to his feet, refusing to give up despite his condition. The words, "We won't let you," pushed Yuku back to the ground. Psychos put her hand down after increasing the gravity around each hero, and the same was true for the heroes who attempted to stand. But, of course, I couldn't get to her without your help, she said, continuing to gloat. As you can see, this girl was astute enough to avoid being around powerful heroes who would have genuinely caused me problems. Thank you very much for your assistance. Thank you, heroes. Damn you. Ignoring the female pro-hero, Psychos laughed and turned back to the girl who was crying, saying, now, for my prize. The monster was pleased by her appearance and reached out to grab her neck, but young Psychos knew it was hopeless before she looked up at the evil Esper with tears on her cheek and red eyes. That didn't happen, though, because a humanoid robot dog appeared out of nowhere and bit her arm, causing no harm, but startling her when it exploded, creating a cloud of black dust. Child Emperor rushed over to young Psychos and seized her wrist, saying, I'm not sure what's going on, but you're attending. Wah! Young Psychos was unable to complete. She was pulled back to her feet by Child Emperor, and they started running when the dust cloud that had been covering adult Psychos abruptly dissipated, causing her to extend her arm towards him. Child Emperor, I'll make sure you're dead this time. She then shoots the hero a yellow lightning bolt. The two of them fell to the ground as young Psychos saw it in time and pulled him away. Child Emperor turned to her in surprise and said, you saved me. Why? Because I don't want you to die. She replied, panting, it's difficult for me to stay in this form because of these handcuffs. You must murder me before she does it, please. Tatsumaki refused when I asked. Tatsumaki is aware of you. Child Emperor inquired. His perplexity changed when she nodded, and he got to his feet and boldly gazed at the malevolent Psychos. Child Emperor, do you truly think she is real? Amused, adult Psychos inquired. You are many different things. But one thing you're not is a good liar. With that, the backup of the Child Emperor opened up, revealing two enormous weapons. When the weapons were activated, they sent a sonic wave that struck adult Psychos and pushed her back. They were shaped like the turbines of an airplane, but the face of it also looked like loudspeakers. Adult Psychos was genuinely in pain for the first time in that battle, and she bit the bottom of her lip to keep from screaming and covered her ears. Child Emperor clarified, I had to create a weapon that could defeat you even though I didn't intend to harm Tatsumaki and Fubuki. Since an Esper's brain is the source of their quirk, all I need to do is make the sounds louder and... He followed his instructions and heard Psychos groan in agony as he completed that statement. How about your fellows? Fool, some of them are in the line of fire. Psychos adults scolded. They won't be as hurt by these. Furthermore, it will be worthwhile if it means putting you back for a short time. Restraining me. Without responding, Child Emperor turned to young Psychos and remarked, I hope Tatsumaki can explain what you are when this is over. She will. I'm grateful, Dote. Psychos gave him a tearful smile. After creating a hole in the middle of his backpack and turning it to face the young Esper, Child Emperor began to strike the Esper with a red beam. No, adult Psychos yelled and thrust her arms out in front of her. Time was running out, and it was clear that he would need to use up the power in his backpack to do both things. She made a psychic shield and started to walk through it, but the beam made contact with her younger self, so she slowly started to disintegrate into the air. Child Emperor continued to hold adult Psychos by putting more power into his sonic cannons. He did not, however, hesitate. The output of his sonic cannons was powerful, and as adult Psychos charged forward, the sonic wave started to push everything in its path, causing cracks to form on the ground and the unconscious and conscious heroes to be flung away. When Child Emperor turned to face young Psychos, blue cracks started to appear and enlarge on her body, and she mouthed two words before passing away, I'm sorry. Even though Child Emperor could hear what she said, there was no way to verify it. Young Psychos' body burst into dazzling blue lights that radiated throughout the block. Child Emperor's backpack collapsed, sending his weapons back inside, and he collapsed to his knees. Unhappy, adult Psychos scowled as she approached Child Emperor's side, still facing the spot where her younger self had perished. When they made eye contact, Child Emperor merely glared at her and said, kill me now, but, at least I can die knowing I finally put a frown on that ugly face of yours. There was no one to stop her from killing the child hero. The young pro-hero was shocked by the adult Psychos' smirk and huff, and his inner alarms even grew louder when she knelt down and stroked his head. Dote, you have my respect. However, not even half of humanity will remain by the time I'm finished. Having said that, she got to her feet and extended her hand at the location where her younger self had perished, shocking Dote and everyone else in the room as the particles that had been young Psychos reformed into a single body. When he was revived, young Psychos gasped, "No, I'm still here." After confirming, adult Psychos grabbed her by the neck and said, "Yes, you are." "No," screamed Child Emperor. The child hero fell to the ground in silence as adult Psychos responded by pointing her finger at him and striking his heart with a lightning strike. In front of her younger self, adult Psychos said, "And now, for you. Just for the record, I only played along with this battle just to show you and the world just why they should fear me." It would appear as though the end was imminent, and it would be in the hands of her malevolent self, and the future would be doomed before it had even had a chance to be saved. Young Psychos looked at her in fear. As young Psychos closed her eyes and accepted her fate, she thought, "I've failed." Then a voice screamed out of nowhere, and both Psychos turned as the voice grew louder. "You gave her up." Izuku let out a cry. "Midoriya," mumbled young Psychos. Psychos the adult growled, "Izuku, are you also here to die?" Izuku leapt from a great distance and punched her in the face, saying, "I won't let you kill her." The blow was more powerful than adult Psychos had anticipated, powerful enough to split the two versions of them apart and send the other one reeling back. Izuku wasn't done yet, though, because as she stopped, he jumped and kicked her, striking her face and then the other side of her head. Before she knew it, he finished it with another punch that sent her flying back. Izuku kept running toward her, the resolve in his eyes and face as clear as day, and the adult Psychos landed on her feet after recovering by flapping her wings. "I will not allow you to murder her. You took away her only desire, which was to assist others. Like I'll allow you to murder her. HMPH. Then allow me to pour your own blood over you." Adult Psychos cried out. Her psychic power shook the entire block as soon as she stomped her foot, and Izuku was startled by the tiny shockwave before he was hit by boulders made of the pavement. Izuku took action, running on toward adult Psychos while shrewdly avoiding the rocks and boulders that were in his path, avoiding, moving parts of his body, and jumping over boulders of different sizes. Almost impressed, adult Psychos reached out to an apartment building and swung her hand down on Izuku. What a dumb kid. His classmates watched with their various families and friends as the building nearly crushed him, and even his own mother gasped. However, Izuku refused to let it happen. He yelled loudly, punched the approaching structure, and destroyed it. Arizona Smash. This caused a cloud of dust to cover the scene, blinding adult Psychos and the audience for a moment before something rushed out of it, and adult Psychos was most startled when Izuku appeared right in front of her, their eyes meeting, his fist poised for the last blow. 100%. One for all. Detriot. Did he just get faster? Adult Psychos couldn't respond quickly enough. SMAAASSSSHHHHH. A mild shockwave was felt, but what shocked everyone watching was Psychos' scream before she bounced on the ground and came to a stop after Izuku's fist struck her face and sent her flying. The most shocking thing about it was that it was Midoriya Izuku. When he stopped, he could still feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins, so he let out a loud cry and inadvertently activated full cowling. Young Psychos was in awe. Someone had actually pushed her older self back. His classmates watched in surprise as the green electricity danced in the air, and after he had calmed down, he huffed and gazed at adult Psychos' body. After a moment on the ground, the monster sat up, and since she hadn't been permanently damaged by Izuku, she smirked with amusement and transformed back into a human. She got up and said, "So, the apprentice has come to play." Young Psychos could only stand by and watch as these two people might end up fighting, but Izuku held his ground and maintained his position. "No, Midoriya, it's not time. You can't defeat her yet. As the future changing, someone, please, save him." All Might, in his muscular form, was racing through rooftops on his way to the battleground, and he was in a hurry to get there. "Hold on, my boy, Midoriya. I'll be right over." Saitama, who was back at his apartment building with two loading trucks parked at the front, looked up at the sky. Fortunately, the police had sent off the reporters earlier, so he, you, and King were not aware of the incident that was taking place. "Saitama, is everything okay?" You, holding a box, inquired. The bald hero replied gravely, "Psychos is in danger." Saitama was in his hero suit before King or the female hero could blink. "Saitama, what did you?" Saitama fled the scene, leaving only a small cloud of dust behind, before you could finish, and after it had settled, both you and King coughed and looked at each other. "We must accompany him. She then dropped the box and grew larger, tearing her clothes, but luckily she had her hero suit on underneath. Hesitantly, King glanced up at her, but as soon as he saw the seriousness on her face, his attitude changed to one of seriousness, and he nodded. "Please, save my son." Tatsumaki flinched as she flew over the city, remembering what Izuku's mother, Inko, had begged her to do, something she was going to do anyhow, but seeing the woman crying as Fubuki consoled her made her feel pity. "I won't forgive you if you let her kill you, Midoriya, so you had better be alright by the time I get there." She then picked up her speed and flew on toward the battleground. Mob and his master were in Sweet Mosk's limousine, and he was irritated by the slight traffic in the lane he was in. He opened his door and said, "I guess we have no choice. We're dropping off here. If we move quickly, we can still make it." Mob and his master exchanged glances, and when his master nodded, the two of them exited the car. Sweet Mask turned to face the direction of the battle, which was probably only a few miles away. Sweet Mask thought, "Just wait, psychos. I'll make sure we end this."
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.